menyampaikan selamat pada Italia yang telah sukses menjalankan presidensi G20 di tahun 2021. Dan Indonesia merasa terhormat untuk meneruskan presidensi G20 tahun 2022. Kami akan menjamu Yang Mulia dan Bapak Ibu di hamparan pantai Bali yang indah, yang menginspirasi gagasan-gagasan inovatif untuk produktivitas G20 ke depan. Sampai bertemu di Indonesia, terima kasih.
Halo, selamat siang teman kumparan. Teman kumparan menyaksikan live streaming B20 Summit Indonesia. Ini merupakan hari kedua dan jelang penutupan atau closing dari B20 Summit Indonesia. Kita akan langsung melihat bagaimana situasi dan kondisi di main venue yang ada. Baik, kita akan ke pertemuan Presiden Jokowi Dodo bersama Uni Eropa. Sebelum kita akan mengupdate bagaimana situasi dan kondisi yang terjadi di main venue B20. Baik, ini merupakan situasi di mana Presiden Jokowi Dodo bertemu dengan Uni Eropa. Setelah tadi Presiden Jokowi Dodo sudah bertemu dengan Presiden Amerika Serikat Joe Biden. Tentunya pertemuan-pertemuan bilateral ini dilakukan jelang KTT G20 atau acara puncak G20 yang akan berlangsung selama 2 hari, besok dan lusa, yakni pada tanggal 15 hingga 16 November 2022. Diketahui pula bahwa kepala negara dari negara-negara anggota G20 yang akan hadir di KTT G20 ini sudah tiba di Bali, Indonesia. Dan Presiden Joko Widodo ini mengadakan agenda pertemuan. Setelah tadi bersama Joe Biden, saat ini bersama pihak Uni Eropa. Dan tentunya dihadiri juga dengan
Yang Mulia dan Bapak
delegasi
Ibu di hamparan
lainnya dalam pertemuan tersebut. Baik, itu sekilas soal pertemuan Presiden Joko Widodo dengan kepala negara yang ada, dan agendanya masih akan terus berlangsung hingga besok acara puncaknya untuk KTT G20. Dan saat ini kita akan melihat bagaimana situasi dan kondisi di main hall B20 Summit, di mana saat ini merupakan summit dialog dengan tema Navigating Disruption Through Innovative and Transformative Recovery. Dan kita akan mendengarkan summit keynote speech dari Presiden Korea Selatan. Kita simak bersama teman kumparan.
The Korean government is currently pursuing a digital platform government as a priority task, through which the private sector takes the lead in dramatically enhancing the quality of public services, while government data and private services are merged to create new value in an enabling environment. In the meantime, for supply-side innovation that harnesses digital technologies to help further enrich the lives of humanity, we need to channel our energy on materializing universal values in the digital space as well. Last September in New York, on the occasion of my attendance at the UN General Assembly, at the NYU, I proposed that for freedom, solidarity, human rights, and other universal values of humanity to be realized also in the digital world, the entire world should engage in efforts to build and safeguard a new digital order. The digital ecosystem must be open to everyone, and anyone should be able to access and use digital data in an equitable manner. In this vein, I believe that the B20 is the most fitting public forum for discussing the global digital order. In this year's B20 Summit, many digital companies that are spearheading digital businesses are taking part. You understand the digital world better than any others, and at the same time, we all share the responsibility for creating a desirable digital order, transcending borders and leaving no one behind in sharing the benefits of the digital era. The B20, I hope, will lead the way in shaping the digital order that is relevant for us all. Committed to leading the G20 discussion for establishing a new digital order, the Korean government will fully support the B20 and G20 in their close collaboration towards that end. Business leaders from around the world, for private-led supply-side innovation to pull us out of the complex global crisis, cooperation has to take place not only amongst governments of each country, but also between private and public sectors and across the private sector in a harmonious manner. And to that end, the B20 needs to play different roles and also adjust its positioning. From the outset, the B20 has gathered views of global business leaders to support governments in their international coordination through the G20, the role it has fulfilled faithfully. At this G20 summit as well, I am sure that facilitation of digital trade, enhancement of inclusivity of global supply chains, and other diverse agendas for cooperation discussed thus far have been put forward by the B20. However, the B20 should now work to not only identify its own unique global business cooperation agendas, but also act as a vehicle for forging partnerships among companies. Through this, I hope that the B20 will position itself as a linchpin of multi-tier collaboration for global supply-side innovation. The Republic of Korea, as one of the global leaders, will stand behind and support the B20's active role to overcome the current global crisis with greater speed and make a significant leap forward beyond. For the entire world, let us gather our wisdom and move forward together. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the Republic of Korea, His Excellency Mr. Yoon Suk-yeol. Once again, thank you, Mr. President. Now, ladies and gentlemen, apart from the President of the Republic of Korea, we'll be having 3 other state leaders speaking on the stage later. The President of the Republic of Indonesia, the Prime Minister of Canada, and the Prime Minister of Australia. And we're also going to take a listen to what Her Majesty Queen Maxima of the Netherlands, in her capacity as UN Secretary General Special Advocate for Inclusive Finance for Development, has to say, as well as actress Anne Hathaway in her capacity as UN Women Goodwill Ambassador speaking about unlocking the full potential of women in the economy. And later, we will have also the Minister of State for Foreign Trade of the United Arab Emirates, His Excellency Thani bin Ahmed Al Zayedi. But I'd like to take you back to the previous sessions, as we had many inspiring speakers and also inspiring leaders sharing to us, especially for those of you who has just joined the second day of B20 Summit just now after the break. And we had Mr. Jeff Bezos and Professor Klaus Schwab that we will later share to you again about what we have gained from both persons. But now the set is ready for the next session. Now we move on to another keynote address touching upon the importance of driving global partnership to accelerate energy transition. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Minister of State for Foreign Trade of the United Arab Emirates, His Excellency Thani bin Ahmed Al Zayedi.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Excellencies, esteemed guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good afternoon to you all. May I begin by convening the greetings and regards of the leadership of the UAE to the Republic of Indonesia and its people, and applaud your nation's presidency of the G20 over the last year. It's my pleasure to be back in Bali and addressing you at this important forum. The B20 Summit plays a vital role in connecting the insights, experiences, expertise of the business community to the policy agendas of the global bodies and governments. The private sector in G20 countries remain the principal driver of the global trade. Collectively, they represent 75% of the all cross-border commerce. They also make up 54% of the UAE's non-oil trade, which has a value of $281.1 billion. It's in the real world of commerce and consumption that ideas are tested, battle-hardened, and either refined or rejected. And it is why the input of the private sector is so critical to the drive long-term transformational changes. Today, there are a few changes quite as critical as energy transition, both as a means to ensure access to energy sources for growing global population and adhere to our commitments the Paris Agreement. The math is simple, as it's daunting to ensure global temperature don't rise by more than 1.5 degrees Celsius by 2100. We need to reduce emission by 50% by 2030. And according to the United Nations, this will require cumulative investments of more than $24 trillion into energy transition technologies over the upcoming 27 years. Alongside the financial investment, there will also need to be a comprehensive policy approach that balances the competing needs of business, society, and environment, especially in the developing world. During G20 Summit in Rome last year, it was made clear that not enough is being done, that we are already falling well short of our targets. And as we emerge from global pandemic and confront the growing threats of recession, it's important that our short-term needs for growth does not overwhelm our long-term commitment to the planet. As such, multilateral approach that harness the public, private, and academic sectors across the world are now required. This simply is not an issue that can be tackled in isolation. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the United Arab Emirates believes it can offer an important voice in this conversation. As a major oil producer, we have been engaged in energy transition since our foundation as a nation in 1971. For us, it means not only switching from one supply to another, but reimagining the very fundamental of our economy. And just as the oil and gas industry now contributes less than 28% of our total GDP, it's our ambition that hydrocarbon will be less than half of our energy mix by 2050. We are already making strong progress. According to the Green fuel index, the UAE has increased our renewable energy capacity more than any other countries in the world over the last 10 years. Thanks to the facilities such as Sheikh Hamad bin Rashid Al Maktoum Solar Park in Dubai, world's largest single solar facility, we now produce the cheapest commercial scale solar power in the planet. In 2009, we commissioned the Middle East's first peaceful nuclear program, and today Baraka plant in Abu Dhabi is saving 5 million tons of CO2 every year. It's perhaps no surprise that Abu Dhabi, our capital, was chosen as the global headquarter of IRENA, the International Renewable Energy Agency. Importantly, these capabilities are forming a new form of energy exports from the Gulf. The UAE now has the means and knowledge to catalyze energy transition in the Middle East, Africa, and Asia. We have now invested $50 billion in clean energy projects in 70 nations across 6 continents, and continue to partner with countries around the world to increase capacity wherever it's needed. Just last week, the UAE and United States of America signed a partnership for accelerating clean energy, which will invest $100 billion to deploy 100 gigawatts of clean energy by 2035. At COP last week, we announced a joint venture to build a 10 gigawatt onshore wind farm in Egypt, capable of offsetting 23.8 million tons of carbon dioxide. This follows our other huge international partnerships, including a pioneering project between the UAE, Israel, and Jordan to trade solar power electricity for drinking water, and investments in hydrogen production in both UK and Africa. This partnership's approach can be seen right here in Indonesia. In 2021, Masdar, the UAE Renewable Energy Pioneers, and Indonesia PJPI joined forces to construct 145 megawatt Serta floating solar plant, the first in Indonesia. Energy transition is also a key component of our new foreign trade agenda, launched last September last year. Our comprehensive economic partnership agreements are creating a new platform for joint ventures and investments in solar, hydrogen, and wind, and sparking research and developments into other critical areas such as water and food security. In July this year, we signed CEPA with Indonesia, a landmark deal that will remove and reduce tariffs on 90% of product lines, remove unnecessary barriers of trade, and create a framework for investments. These measures will help push the value of bilateral trade between UAE and Indonesia from 3 billion to beyond 10 billion within 5 years. The UAE-Indonesia CEPA is building on firm foundations. In the first 9 months of 2022, non-oil trade reached $2.8 billion, 33% growth on the same period, 2021. And since 2019, we have concluded agreements with combined value of $32 billion, many of them, as we have mentioned, in renewable energy. We have added to these bilateral agreements here in Bali with 16 new MOUs covering sectors on diverse as aviation, healthcare, electricity, mobility solutions, and many others. Ladies and gentlemen, it's this broad-based multilateral approach that can be applied to a range of issues, and it's clear that our net zero commitments are not in opposition to the growth objective that can help catalyze them. And many of the investment community already agree. The Global Greenfields Investment Trends Report from 2020 says that renewable energy received $85.2 billion across 466 projects in 2021, making it is the biggest single recipient of FDI. The current energy supply crisis is a point of concern, but it should be a moment of realization. We already have many of the solutions at our fingertips. What we need to do now is mobilize the capital to begin these projects where they are needed. It is, I fully believe, the ultimate win-win investment. We in the UAE are ready to work with the international community to unlock these opportunities and deliver the best possible retain sustainable access to clean energy. Looking forward to work with many of you and enjoy the rest of the events. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister Al-Zaidi. Some important points to highlight that according to the Green Fuel Index, the UAE has increased their renewable energy capacity more than any other country in the world over the last 10 years. And in 2009, as the minister said, the country commissioned the Middle East's first peaceful nuclear program, And today, the Baraka nuclear plant in Abu Dhabi is saving 5 million tons of CO2 every year. And there's a coordination and collaboration as well with the Indonesian government. The UAE has means and also knowledge to catalyze energy transition in the Middle East, Africa, and Asia, including in Indonesia, in which 145 megawatt Cirata floating solar plant was jointly constructed in 2021 by PJBR and Masdar, the UAE's renewable energy pioneer. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's now move on to the next session. I'm pleased and honored to share with you that we have a very special speaker, as we mentioned earlier, Her Majesty Queen Maxima of the Netherlands. Queen Maxima has served as the United Nations Secretary General's Special Advocate for Inclusive Finance for Development, or the UNSGSA, since 2009. As a special advocate, she is a leading global voice on advancing universal access to and responsible usage of affordable, effective, and safe financial services. The UNSGSA raises awareness, serves as a convener, encourages leaders, and supports actions to expand financial inclusion at a global and country level, all in close collaboration with partners from the public and also private sectors. Thus, here presenting to you on the topic of enabling digital transformation to promote financial inclusion. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Her Majesty Queen Maxima.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure to join with you virtually and to support Indonesia's B20 presidency. I thank you for this opportunity to put financial inclusion at the heart of our discussions. These are difficult times for people everywhere, and we're all seeking new ways to tackle the challenges before us, from COVID to conflict to inflation to climate change. Inclusive finance offers new opportunities to build resilience, weather shocks, and invest in a more prosperous future. Over the last decade, a quarter of the world's adult population has gained access to financial services. Today, 76% of adults globally are now financially included. In my work as the UN Secretary General's Special Advocate, I have seen the remarkable difference that inclusive digital infrastructure in concert with digital financial services make for people and small businesses. From Jakarta to East Africa, millions of small merchants are now paid and making payments with their own phones, transforming their ability to invest. During the COVID pandemic, governments from Brazil to Togo sent emergency digital payments directly to vulnerable households at unprecedented speed. But we should move beyond payments. A broad range of financial services, such as savings, insurance, and credit, are needed for individuals, households, and SMEs to fully benefit from the digital economy. We also need continued commitment to put in place a digital financial infrastructure that is inclusive, safe, and equitable. Greater connectivity and digital IDs allow access to financial services for millions previously left behind. Fair competition and interoperable payment systems help markets work better for even the smaller scale customers. Cybersecurity, consumer protection, data governance, and digital literacy help marginalized communities navigate these services in ways that really work for them. India offers a good example with the India Stack, which combines ID cards, a payment interface, and account aggregators in one easily accessible platform. Peru and Estonia have shown how smaller countries can also have digital IDs, payments, and e-governance use cases to build digital stacks that really work for all. Public-private collaborations are key for innovation and scale. Indonesia's digital and employment assistance programs, Kartu Prakerja, has demonstrated how partnering with digital training institutes, job platforms, online marketplaces, and fintechs helped support over 11 million beneficiaries. This includes building skills to start businesses or find employment, while providing cash assistance directly to the e-wallet in their mobile phones. Private-private partnerships that provide services across entire value chains is also crucial, especially for SMEs. There are many examples of fintechs creating digital ecosystems to help small businesses digitize their inventory management, marketing, payments, credit, and sales. Suddenly, these SMEs leap forward and connect to larger markets beyond the brick-and-mortar presence. Critical here is the transparency in the collection, sharing, and usage of customers' and SMEs' data. Most customers grant consent without reading the terms and conditions, which are often long and hard to comprehend. Individuals and businesses often do not know the value of the data they create. And even if they do, they find it difficult to assert their rights or benefit from the value in the form of better products or lower costs. This is urgent, as platform-based businesses increasingly explore using customers' data footprints to embed financial services in social media, e-commerce, and entertainment platforms. During today's summits, you will be able to discuss all these important issues. So, let us ask, how can we finance, design, and govern this digital stack infrastructure in a more inclusive way? How can we empower individuals and SMEs with their own data? And how can public-private and private-private collaborations further take advantage of these digital transformation possibilities to provide services to the vulnerable, as well as enable them to benefit from the digital economy? It will require action from all stakeholders, especially the many leaders from the business, policy, and financial sectors here today from Indonesia, G20 countries, and around the world. Your role is crucial. I wish you every success in your efforts to create a digital financial system which really benefits everyone.
Queen Maxima of the Netherlands, a very important message indeed from the Queen of the Netherlands. And the Queen also said that we should move beyond payment for digital financial services because we need savings, insurance, and also credits that are needed by individuals, households, and MSMEs to fully benefit from the digital economy. And we also need to put in place a digital financial infrastructure that is inclusive, safe, and equitable. And it's really a pride moment for Indonesians that she mentioned about the pre-employment card, or in Indonesia we call as Kartu Prakerja, because personally it was very close to me, Kartu Prakerja. I was assigned to host and also MC the launch of Kartu Prakerja, or the pre-employment card. And that Kartu Prakerja just started like months, but then the pandemic hit and the government needs to act fast and adjust and also transform Kartu Prakerja into assistance fund. So the card that was supposedly designed for assistance, for entrepreneurship, for retraining, upskilling, then was transformed into assistance fund. And that was a proof of the agility of the government of Indonesia in transforming that facility into something that people can rely on to survive during a very difficult time during the pandemic. And I believe that many governments and also many business leaders did the same agility into their country, into their business to save lives, because we were facing difficulties back then. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we need to do some adjustment about the scheduling. I would like to invite now Hathaway to remind us about how important equality is and how important women's role in making our life better, and the importance of women to be given the same opportunity. Please welcome Anne Hathaway.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, It's my privilege to speak to you today as a Goodwill Ambassador for UN Women. Women's participation and equal power is fundamental to progress for everyone. I'm sure you are aware of the evidence which shows conclusively that equality between women and men make us all safer, happier, more prosperous, and more successful. And yet, the reality in which we find ourselves is that at the current rate of progress, it may take another 300 years to achieve gender equality. I hope we all agree this is 3 centuries too long. It is going to take more than hope to get us to a better future. Our current position is far from good. Progress for women and girls is in dramatic reverse in many countries. Rights and freedoms that women and girls had experienced as normal, to work, to learn, to make choices about their bodies, have been abruptly taken away. Some of those losses have been legislated or imposed by governing authorities against courageous resistance. Others have been brought to light and sharpened by unprecedented global crises, such as the COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic had a devastating impact on us all, but it hit women especially hard. There was a frightening intensification of domestic violence against women. Another threat to women's safety was the seismic loss of economic opportunities. Millions of women left the workforce in 2020. They lost their jobs at faster rates than men and have stayed out of the job market longer. And now, as fuel and food prices rise globally, amidst the climate emergency and sustained military conflicts, women's incomes, as well as their contributions to businesses' success and the recovery of markets, matter even more than ever. Ironically, the pandemic also showed us just how much our future progress depends on the skills and leadership of women. Women sustained our healthcare systems and invented life-saving vaccines. As leaders of countries, they gave us some of the most effective responses to the pandemic. And yet, we show time and time again that we do not equally value women's participation, contribution, and leadership. This year, in 169 countries and areas, that's most of the world, women's labor force participation is expected to stay below pre-pandemic levels. What can we attribute this to? Well, it's my regret to share with you that during the pandemic, women did an additional 512 billion hours of unpaid care work at home. While I let that statistic sink in, I would like to acknowledge the essential importance of care. Care is fundamental to the basic functioning of our economies and societies, and I'm not meaning to suggest otherwise. In fact, the reality is, everyone will need care at some point in their life. However, we must also recognize the reality that the current way care is provided and valued is unfair and unsustainable. We must address the cultural biases that automatically label care as women's work. Even before the pandemic, women spent more than 3 times as many hours as men on unpaid care and domestic work. It was unfair then, it's worse now. It's time to admit that something is very, very off. Whether or not we mean to, the fact is, we are taking advantage of women. Simply put, we must stop penalizing women for caring. We must stop relying on women to make it work and instead proactively make possible, support, and fairly compensate care work. UN Women has observed the care that's appreciated and properly valued in all its form is a critical missing link in unlocking the full potential of women in the economy and in society, which is, of course, the same thing as unlocking the full potential of everyone in the economy and society. Governments, businesses, and civil society can all play a role in this. UN Women would like to propose these practical and immediate actions. Ask governments to support care services, pay the taxes that fund them, prioritize the creation of family-friendly workplaces which include flexible working hours, paid parental leave, and in-house childcare facilities. This is a moment when we must urgently act not only to restore what has been lost for women and girls, but to end the harmful status quo which keeps inequality thriving. The stakes simply couldn't be higher. The world, not just women, needs innovative solutions more than ever. Optimizing inclusivity is our best chance at success. This esteemed group, which I am honored to address today, find themselves tasked with making decisions that shape lives. I urge you, put women at the heart of economic growth and recovery. be the architects of a better future by doing what no one else has effectively done before. Prioritize women for the good of all. Thank you.
That was a very powerful message from Anne Hathaway, UN Women Goodwill Ambassador, ladies and gentlemen, unlocking the full potential of women in the economy. And one of the most interesting points that I think was pointed out by Ms. Hathaway was that women and men suffer more during the pandemic, but women suffer more. And we're taking advantage of women, and we penalize women for caring. So we need to change and put women on priority for the better good of all. It is really consistent with the B20 legacies that was kicked off yesterday, or was inaugurated yesterday. One Global Women Empowerment, or OGWE, aggregating existing capacities and networks to accelerate and scale impactful women empowerment efforts globally. And the objective of the B20 legacy, One Global Women Empowerment, that was inaugurated or strengthened yesterday, was that to facilitate the acceleration of impactful inclusion of women in businesses in the global economy by providing digital capability, knowledge sharing, funding and investment, technical support, and supportive policies. And hopefully the B20 legacies can be translated into actions and will benefit women in general. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we will now proceed to the next session. This is to announce a special B20 initiatives on green transition through the Green EV Fund cooperation that has been supported by the B20 Finance and Infrastructure Task Force. Just a bit of a background that we will witness a signing ceremony of $2 billion of Green EV Fund to invest in the end-to-end value chain of the EV ecosystem across sectors to achieve climate goals. We are still waiting for our speakers as well as the Minister of Finance of the Republic of Indonesia, but the presentation and also the signing ceremony will give us an idea about several things. Firstly is about why we invest in the EV value chain. This is a very critical question to answer, and later our speaker will explain about 5 different reasons why we need to invest in EV. First and foremost is that global trend of increasing environmental awareness is on the rise, and fundamental cost and technology improvements, as what Professor Schwab said earlier, that the cost of technology will decrease eventually, including for cleaner energy. And the third is exponential growth in the global EV market. And the reason number 4 being $1 trillion opportunity in the electrification of transportation. And last but not least, emerging EV market in Indonesia with supportive fundamentals. Later, the speaker, Mr. Rida, will explain more about that. But now I would like to welcome all the delegates who have just come to the main ballroom. And we're still waiting for the Finance Minister, Ibu Sri Mulyani. But we will start the procession or the signing ceremony once she arrives. And we will also answer questions, why is it so attractive to invest in the EV sector in Indonesia? So yesterday, if you joined the first day, there was a bit of rivalry between Ministers of Energy, Minister of Tourism, and also Minister of Health, arguing about which is the most lucrative, which is the most financially feasible to invest in. Is it in the health sector? Is it in the tourism sector? Or is it in the energy sector? But this session would argue that it is also important to invest in the EV clean energy sector because of some of the benefits that we will gain, not only us as investors, but also the earth and our generation. Now we would like to welcome Bapak Erick Thohir, His Excellency Mr. Erick Thohir, the Minister of State-Owned Enterprises, or in Indonesia we call it BUMN. Thank you so much, Pak Erick, for coming. And for this ceremony, we're still waiting for the Minister of Finance of the Republic of Indonesia, Ibu Sri Mulyani. And the reason being, ladies and gentlemen, why Indonesia is attractive for capturing the EV investment opportunity, because the country is an emerging global nickel hub. As we learned from the previous speakers in our session, that Indonesia is now committed not to exporting nickel ore or raw materials, but now the country is transforming into exporting value-added materials, value-added goods. And in the future, the country is aiming to export battery as well for EV. The second reason being robust potential EV market, because the EV sales target by 2025 in Indonesia is projected to be 2.5 million EV sales. And last but not least is huge planned investment as part of the EV value chain, that the EV planned investment by 2033 in Indonesia is planned to be 71 billion US dollars. And later, Pak Rida Wirakusuma will explain more about this. I'd like to ask the organizing committee though, can we invite Pak Rida to the stage to do the presentation first? All right. Okay, so let me give an introduction, Pak Rida. I would like to invite to come on stage the chair of B20 Indonesia's Finance and Infrastructure Task Force, CEO of Indonesia Investment Authority, or locally known as INA, Bapak Rida Wirakusuma. I have touched upon, Pak Rida, about your presentation, a bit about your presentation on how we need to invest in the EV market in Indonesia. But please continue, Pak Rida. The time is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As the chair of B20 Finance and Infrastructure and CEO of Indonesian Investment Authority, it is my pleasure to present to you one of INA's upcoming investment, which is a green electric vehicle fund, together with our partner CATL, a global leader in lithium-ion battery, and CMB International, a leading investment bank in China, and the early investor of CATL and electric vehicle. As part of the Indonesian Investment Authority, we have a dual mandate to not only deliver the risk-adjusted return, but also helping the nation develop sustainably. For example, I'm pleased to also share with you, yesterday we have signed a conditional share subscription and purchase agreement between Indonesia's largest pharmaceutical and integrated healthcare between us and Silk Road Fund as well as Biopharma. So I'm also pleased to actually share with you that this event is really truly part of our push, B20, G20, towards a better future for our children in terms of fighting the climate change. We can just share some of my presentation if you may, or otherwise I can just speak. First and foremost, as you know, climate change and the transition to net zero has been a key area of focus of B20 as well as the G20. This green EV, as you know, supports the B20 legacy priority of the accelerating the green transition. So it is only appropriate that in this occasion we have a signing which is witnessed by my boss and also the Minister of State on Entity, Mr. Erick Thohir. I think people will be asking why we invest in the EV value chain. First, I think the reduction of CO2 emission drives huge, rapid pace of electric vehicle adoption as well as market penetration. Secondly, electric vehicle has come a long, long way. It will continue to become more and more advanced as well as cost efficient. In just 2 years, for example, EVs are expected to be in cost parity with conventional cars. The most significant driver of this cost efficiency is the battery cost, and which is the expertise of CATL, which fell by almost 90% in just over 10 years. Thirdly, the global market for EV has grown very rapidly. In just 3 years, the number of EVs on the road tripled. And last year, there were more than 16 million EVs on the road. It is projected that within 4 years, more than 50% of all the vehicles sold will be electric vehicles. And it is undeniably that the end-to-end value chain for EV is huge, and by 2030 to 2035, all cars are expected to be 100% electric. Now let's talk a little bit about Indonesia. The opportunity here is similarly huge. In 2020, there were approximately 136 million motor vehicles in Indonesia, about 85% of which are motorcycles. The government has set targets to support vertical integration in the EV supply chain. For example, 2030 production target is 2.5 million electric motorcycle and 600, I think this is the next slide please, 600,000 electric cars. And from 2040 onwards, only electric motorcycles will be allowed to be sold. So why Indonesia specifically? Nickel is a critical ingredient in the lithium-ion battery cells used in most electric vehicles. Within 10 years, Indonesia is expected to become the largest supplier of refined nickel with more than half of the world's refined nickel output. And I had a chance to speak on the site with the chairman of CATL, who's with us here, who mentioned to me that while nickel is an extremely important ingredient, it only so much so if the nickel price is actually within the level that is cost efficient. So, I think Indonesia cannot rest on its laurels, even though it has a lot of nickel, but if nickel price continues to go up, it's not going to be the material of choice. Number two, as you saw earlier, the motor vehicle market in Indonesia represents a huge opportunity. By 2025, for example, it is projected that there will have been 2.1 million electric motorcycle sales and 400,000 electric car sales. And finally, obviously, the total planned investment in Indonesia EV value chain only is estimated to be over 70 billion in 2023 and only going to be growing from there. All those reasons, we are extremely honored to partner together with CATL, a global leader in lithium-ion battery development and manufacturing. CATL has been the #1 ranked company globally in terms of EV battery for the past 5 years. 3.8 million EVs around the world are currently running with CATL batteries. Alongside CATL, we are also partnering with CMB International, who is an early investor of CATL and has strong proven investment track record in EV value chain with more than $2 billion of cumulative investment in EV value chain. With CATL and CMB International as the main partners, we are looking for limited partners to invest in green EV fund to seize this EV value chain opportunity primarily in Indonesia. The size of the fund that we will be announcing is expected to be at least $2 billion and will be majority invested in Indonesia. So now I would like to give the stage back to the MC for inviting relevant parties to join me on the stage for the Green EV Fund MOU signing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pak Rida. Could you please stay on stage as we will start the signing ceremony. Once again, this is the $2 billion of Green EV Fund to invest in the end-to-end value chain of the EV ecosystem across sectors to achieve climate goals. And Mr. Rida has explained about why it is really lucrative, why it is really important as well to invest in the EV sector in Indonesia. Now, to proceed with the signing ceremony, which will be represented by 3 parties, we would like to invite Mr. Chiang Lee, Deputy CEO of CATL, Mr. Arif Budiman, Deputy Chair of B20 Finance and Infrastructure Task Force, Deputy CEO of Indonesia Investment Authority or INA, Mr. Hong Po Wang, CIO of CMB International Capital Corporation Limited, or CMBI. Also, to witness this joint effort, I would like to invite as well His Excellency Mr. Erick Thohir, the Minister of State-Owned Enterprises, or BUMN, of the Republic of Indonesia. Mr. Arsyad Rashid, Chairman of Indonesian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, or Kadin Indonesia. Ms. Sinta Kamdani, Chair of B20 Indonesia. Mr. Cheng Yu-chun, the Chairman and Founder of CATL. Mr. Zhu Chao, Chief Executive Officer of China Merchants Bank International Capital Limited, or CMBI, and Mr. Bill Winters, Group CEO of Standard Chartered Bank. And now, to officiate this commitment, we would like to welcome Mr. Chiang Li, Mr. Arif Budiman, and Mr. Hong Po Wang to sign the documents. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a big round of applause, and may this investment towards the end-to-end value chain of the EV sectors will realize the ambition to accelerate a just transition towards a net zero world. Please stay on stage, gentlemen, and Ibu Sinta, as we're about to take photos in celebration of this important milestone. Let's now take a picture first. Ibu Sinta, let's now take a picture first in celebration of this very important milestone. Please stand behind as we will take pictures together to celebrate this very important moment. Let's give a big round of applause once again for the signing ceremony of the EV Fund. This investment towards the end-to-end value chain of the EV sectors will realize the ambition to accelerate a just transition towards a net zero world. Thank you very much, Ibu Sinta and gentlemen. It's really inspiring to see such a signing ceremony, and it is consistent with the B20 legacy that we inaugurated, and also we strengthened yesterday about B20 legacy, Carbon Center of Excellence. If you followed yesterday's session, there was a bell pressing or bell pushing on Carbon Center of Excellence. I'd like to give you an idea about what this B20 legacy about Carbon Center of Excellence really is. So the idea of B20 Legacy Carbon Center of Excellence is enabling the growth of carbon trading toward net zero. And the objective is to become a digital center of excellence to provide business with required knowledge to enter or scale up their carbon trading activities. And the milestone for this particular B20 Legacy is that on October 2022, they launched the first practice sharing session in collaboration with the ICDX. On November 2022, they launched B20 in collaboration with Bloomberg NEF, Carbon Center of Excellence, with Select Knowledge Hub modules. And in 2023 onwards, they would develop more comprehensive advanced modules on carbon trading and conduct practice sharing sessions regularly. Now, as you can see in front of you, we are still prepping up for the next panel discussion. This is panel discussion 3 of the day, and we'll be talking about investing in inclusive growth for a resilient future. But talking about B20 legacy though, yesterday there were 4 B20 legacies that we witnessed together apart from Carbon Center of Excellence. We also had B20 legacies, which is B20 Wiki. The idea of B20 Wiki is to scale up the next generation mid-sized companies to be part of the global supply chain. And the background is that mid-sized companies make up only 2% of all business enterprises globally. So they need to be empowered, because of the many MSMEs that we can find around us. And the main challenges for B20 Week is that lack of business acumen and lack of capabilities to capture digitalization and export opportunities. And last but not least is the Global One-Shot Program. This is to develop a scalable model to increase global equity in the development and delivery of vaccines and injectables through strategic collaboration with key stakeholders. And those were the B20 legacies that we inaugurated and also strengthened yesterday. So, ladies and gentlemen, the setting is ready. Now it is for us to enjoy and also follow another session with the theme of investing in inclusive growth for a resilient future. And for this session, I would like to invite on stage the moderator, Mr. Bob Sternfels, Global Managing Director of McKinsey & Company, Mr. Alan Job, CEO of Unilever, Ms. Kathleen Quirk, President of Freeport-McMoRan Inc., Ms. Mari Elka Pangestu, Managing Director of Development Policy and Partnership of the World Bank, and Mr. Roy Gori, CEO of Manulife. Well, it turns out we still need to wait yet again for the next session for panel discussion that will talk about investing in inclusive growth for a resilient future. I would like to invite once again for the moderator of this session, Mr. Bob Sternfels, Global Managing Director of McKinsey & Company, and Mr. Alan Job, CEO of Unilever, Ms. Kathleen Quirk, President of Freeport-McMoRan Inc., Ms. Mari Elka Pangestu, Managing Director of Development Policy and Partnership of the World Bank, and Mr. Roy Gori, CEO of Manulife. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a big round of applause for this panel discussion on the topic of investing in inclusive growth for a resilient future. Mr. Bob Sternfels, the time is yours.
Super. Well, hi everybody. I know we've had an action-packed 2 days, but I just wanted to say that I'm thrilled to be here. I'm Bob Sternfels, the Global Managing Partner for McKinsey. And more importantly, I'm very excited to introduce the panel that we have to discuss inclusive growth. I'll start with Alan Job, CEO of Unilever. Last I checked, 190 countries. I think I've got that at least close to right. But what you may not know is Alan's also the board chair of UNICEF's Generation Unlimited and the vice chair of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development's Executive Committee. So welcome, Alan. Next to Alan, we have Kathleen Quirk, the president of Freeport-McMoRan. Welcome. They're the world's largest copper company. And Kathleen spent over 30 years at Freeport. Before this, she was CFO from 2003 to 2022. So welcome, Kathleen. Marie Pangestu. Welcome, Marie. Marie is the Managing Director of Policy Development and Partnership at the World Bank. We're just sorting out some logistics here. But before joining the World Bank, Marie was the Minister of Tourism and Trade from 2004 to 2011 here in Indonesia, and the Minister the Minister of Trade from 2004 to 2011, and the Minister of Tourism from 2011 to 2014. So thank you, Marie. And finally, but not least, we have Roy Gorey, who's the President and CEO of Manulife. Welcome. It's Canada's largest insurance company and one of the world's largest asset management companies. But Roy also has a deep commitment to Asia, and before becoming CEO in 2017, was Manulife's CEO for Asia, starting in 2015. So welcome. You're also on the board of the Business Council for Canada and a member of the Geneva Association. So we're going to have an action-packed set of conversations. Before we start, I thought I'd just offer a few thought starters to get us going. And I think we'd agree that there's no more time for inclusive growth than now. And there are challenges independently, inclusion and growth. But the argument that I'm going to make is the time for thinking about this as an and. Growth with inclusion is no more important than today. Let me hit a highlight across a couple of them. We've made remarkable progress on inclusion over the past 30 years. And the number of people living in extreme poverty has decreased by 70% since 2000. That's a remarkable accomplishment. But inequity still exists. Inequity still exists. 8 out of 10 people on the planet live in societies where the income gap is widening. From the pandemic alone, we've had massive implications. Over 170 million people in Asia since 2020 fell into poverty. 170 million people. And women in particular have been hit hard by the pandemic. They represent 30% of the global workforce, but were 54% of the dislocated since the pandemic. Now, we did some work in McKinsey Global Institute to say, what if we really get this right? What could inclusive growth mean? And I'll just throw out a bit of a tagline, which is there's an opportunity by providing more inclusion to healthcare to add 45 billion years of life on this planet in this decade, to add 11 trillion to our global economy just by focusing on women's equality. And we can add 812 million workers to the global workforce in India and Africa alone by 2050. Some of the ideas that I think we'll talk about as we go through this are going to be things like the power of upskilling, the role of equitable compensation, the role that SMEs play, and how we provide access for all. I'm going to let the panelists take us into that in more detail, but without further ado, I'd love to jump in to these topics. So welcome, everybody.
Thank you, Rob.
Alan, maybe I can start with you if that's okay. You're sitting closest to me, so you get to jump in. And one of the themes that I've heard you talk about often is this notion of a living wage. Help us understand what you mean by that and how it relates to this topic of inclusion.
Sure. Selamat pagi, excellencies, Ibu Sri, distinguished guests. Thank you very much for allowing us to be here. Not everybody may know what a living wage is. It is simply enough money for a family to be able to feed, clothe, house, and educate themselves. And we think it's a reasonable expectation that in society we would want people to be able to do that. So a number of years ago, Unilever set about saying, do we pay all of our people a fair living wage? And it turned out we did not. It took us 3 years to get to a position where we could say with confidence, everyone in Unilever earns a fair living wage. We then last year committed that by 2030, everyone in our value chain, all our suppliers, we will require to pay their employees a fair living wage if they would like to do business with Unilever. And that extends our reach from hundreds of thousands of people to millions of people. The rationale is as follows. First of all, employees who are paid properly are more likely to stay, demonstrate higher levels of productivity, but more importantly, it creates prosperous societies, societies that have got the capacity to buy the kind of products and brands that Unilever sells. So this is not just a moral imperative, it's a business imperative. Secondly, we know that growing wages, a fair living wage, helps contribute overall to economic growth. In fact, for every 1% increase in base wages, you get a 0.5% increase in retail consumption, which is a dramatic multiple. Most importantly, socially inclusive growth is also environmentally inclusive growth, because the deforestation that's happening around the world is largely not the consequence of the advanced industrial complex. It's the result of impoverished people living next to high-value rainforests and peatlands having to destroy nature and the environment in order to feed their families. So we are unequivocally, we're all in on a fair living wage or a fair living income by 2030 for everyone in Unilever's value chain to drive consumption, to drive economic growth, and to protect the environment.
Super. Well, thank you, Alan. Let me, Marie, can I turn to you? And you know, in my opening, I talked about how the pandemic had really been unfair to women, disproportionately hit in terms of job dislocation. And as we look forward, when we think about the challenge of meeting the talent requirements we have over this decade, the opportunity for inclusion when we think about women, women-led businesses, how do we unleash this opportunity and not let the dislocation from the pandemic set us behind?
Yeah, thank you for your question. Selamat siang, Ibu Sri Mulyani, dan selamat siang kepada semua teman-teman. Good afternoon to everybody. That's a very good question. Besides job losses, so I think just to recap what happened during the pandemic and how it had a bigger impact on women than men. First, it was that most of the health workers were women, so they were more affected. Second, the health services in many developing countries were very focused on the pandemic. So women's health services were also not being delivered. So you had higher, maternal mortality and so on, and a lot of impact on women. Third, gender-based violence increased. Fourth, women were more likely to lose jobs because they had to stay home to take care of their children who are not going to school or the elderly parents. And women, this is based on data, and women-owned businesses were also more likely to shut down. One of the reasons is because women-owned business, a lot of companies that were able to survive during the pandemic was because they could adapt to digital technology. But our findings were that women-owned businesses were less able also to, adapt to digital technology. So that shows you in a way that was what happened during the pandemic, but they also reflect the issues that women have faced. And I think moving forward, during the pandemic, we had to be very conscious about designing the policies in the response to the pandemic to make sure that we do not further or reverse the progress we had made in reducing the gender gap. So you got to make sure the health services to women were delivered. Oh, there was one more data that I found really quite heartbreaking. Women, because your income fell, you eat less. And women were eating less because they were, giving the food to the family rather than to themselves. So that was another heartbreaking, and that's why you need to have the social protection program pay attention to these differences, right? So that's during the pandemic. So moving forward, what we should do is, of course, we are just designing our new gender strategy, so I can say it. Women is about the economy. Yeah, okay, equality and reducing the gender gap is about right of women, but it's also about the economy. And you mentioned some numbers. Was it 11 trillion?
Yeah, 11
that could
trillion.
be saved, that could be gained. You know, labor force participation of women is about 50% compared to men at 80% in today's age, right? And in some regions like the Middle East, it's like 20, 30%. In Asia, it's a little bit better, closer to 60%, but it's still less than men, right? And you are not employing the productive workforce that you could have, right? And that is the 11 trillion. And I had another statistic here, 172 trillion if you had paid the difference in lifetime earnings between men and women, right? So that's the kind of the broader economic numbers. But then you've got to make sure that you have a gender strategy that is from the whole lifetime from a girl to a woman. That means equal rights to nutrition, to the mother when they are still pregnant, whether to make sure that they deliver the healthy babies, and education, equal access to education, and then equal access to job opportunities, legal rights for the ownership of assets, and having the training and the upskilling of the know-how so that they can also be not in a disadvantaged position. So skills training, especially digital, financial inclusion. I know that you're big on financial inclusion. I mean, financial services to women. And there's a whole lot of things there which are partly our finding. Basically, in a nutshell, we have this publication called Women, Business and the Law, and we monitor the kind of regulations and laws that discriminate against women, whether for job opportunity or for financial inclusion or ownership of assets. That, if you can do a lot of stuff, reforms there, which was happened in the Middle East, and something very simple like in Saudi Arabia, allowing women to travel by themselves. You know, we take that so much for granted, but allowing they deregulated and reformed. One regulation was women can travel on their own. That led to the increase of labor force participation from 20 to 30%. Still very low, yeah? But still, I just give you an example on that. But I think there's also a cultural aspect that needs to also be addressed. And you have to really understand why is the labor force participation low? And is it the regulation? What is it that you need to address? And the final thing I would say is that things we take for granted, safe transportation for women. You know, I was very amazed, why is it so low in the Middle East? And one of the answers was not being able to travel safely to their place of work, was not allowing women to be able to work, or safe place to work, things like that. These are things that we have to really work with the private sector. We have the private sector here from many countries. You know, having the conducive place of work for women is another important aspect. I probably talked too long, but I've given you at least what's in my head.
Not at all. And I think the notion that really sticks with me is tackling this in a systems-based way, yes, as opposed to, is there one piece, looking across the entire system. But what also stuck with me is the enormous upside of getting this right. So thank you. You mentioned financial inclusion along the way, and Roy, maybe I can pick this up with you. I hope you're an advocate of the power that financial markets can bring, given what you do. But I'd love to pick on this notion of, as you think about financial inclusion, what are the opportunities, challenges there, given what you've seen over your career?
Great, thanks, Bob. And it's great to be back in Indonesia, and it's great to be back doing this in person again after having been stuck in our basements for 2.5 years. So congratulations to Indonesia for hosting such a tremendous event. I think this is such an incredibly important panel discussion. This whole idea of equity and inclusion is something that we really need to grapple with. And I think to tackle the problem, you have to first see the problem for what it really is. And on this topic, you know, we've talked about gender inclusion and equity. We've talked in other panels about racial inequity and also income inequality. And I think these are all very important issues that we need to grapple with. And On the topic of gender inequality, there are still globally 2.4 billion women who don't have the same economic rights as men. That's sort of incredibly profound and also very scary. On the topic of income inequality, the top 10% of the population's income is equivalent of the bottom, well, actually 30 times the equivalent of the bottom 50%'s population. So we have a huge issue as it relates to income inequality. And even today, after 3 years of the pandemic, 70% of the world's population is currently dealing with a reduced income equality. So that's a problem that we have to really look at head on in order to tackle it. On the topic of financial inclusion, Bob, there are, in my mind, 3 key issues that need to be tackled. The first is around awareness, the second is around pricing, and the third is around access. On the topic of awareness, the sad truth is that today, 1 in 3 people are financially literate globally. That means that there isn't a common basic understanding about how to manage financial affairs. And that's true not just in developing markets, but it's also true in developed markets. And from my perspective, I think the most important way to tackle that issue is to start education at the grassroots in schools. So one of the things that we're doing as an organization is to facilitate and foster the education of financial literacy in secondary education so that we can actually start very early. At the same time, we're trying to really develop more creative ways to educate the population through social media and so on and so forth. On the topic of pricing, most products across all industries are typically priced at the mass affluent because that's where companies can make the most money. The biggest pivot that I think we need to make in the business world is to play the long game, and that requires us to think about pricing products much more cheaply, but in some cases, they may not actually be profitable in the short term, but will facilitate, through the establishment of a relationship, more profitable selling to those customers in future years. That is a transformation shift that's going to be required for businesses to move beyond just looking at the next year or the next quarter's profitability, to be thinking about profitability in terms of 5, 10, 15 years down the road. So I think from a pricing perspective, we have to make products much more affordable, certainly in the financial space, so that we can actually make them more accessible to every consumer around the world. And then the third topic is that of awareness. And again, the sad truth is that there aren't enough people that get access to financial services and financial products. And again, there are 3 billion people in the world today that have never even accessed the internet. So from our perspective, we need to do a better job of creating access to digital technologies so that we can actually connect with every single consumer and every single a person in the planet. So I think the third key driver to drive financial inclusion is to really improve the availability of digital tools and technologies to the masses so that they can actually transact with products that will actually help them fulfill their financial services needs. So I think this is a problem that needs both public and private partnership, and quite frankly, the business community needs to step up to do its part.
Very powerful. And maybe, Kathleen, I could take that notion of public-private partnership, and you've had a long history of leadership in Indonesia in particular. When you think about the role of large business versus, say, small business, and here we've talked a lot about MSMEs, and I pulled some data on MSMEs, and they're 99% of firms in the world, 70% of employment, but only 40% of GDP. And when you think about how to catalyze these smaller businesses' growth, I'd love your perspective on what role does large enterprise have, and then is it a go it alone, or is it done in some kind of collaboration, public-private?
Thanks, Bob, and thanks for your attention today. It's a great honor for me to be here, particularly in Indonesia and Bali. Indonesia is a very special place for our company. We have a big operation here that we've operated in for over 55 years now. And it's a great case study in inclusive and sustainable growth. We operate in Papua, And when we first arrived in Papua, it was an exploration project. We operate a large mine there. And there was not a trained workforce at all. And we had to develop one of the most technically challenging operations in the world. And so at first we brought in technical expertise from around the world, but over time, our Indonesian workforce, which is about 27,000 people, 98% Indonesian, is actually developing and operating one of the most complex operations in the world. And as we have developed over the years, that's provided a lot of opportunity, not only for our workforce, but communities where we operate. We're roughly 90% of the GDP of the Regency where our operations are located. We're roughly 40% of the GDP of the province of Papua. So we're very important. But what's happened over time is that with technology, with innovation, our workforce has been upskilled. They can now compete not only in Indonesia, but any operation around the world. And to Alan's point about fair wage and living wage, we make sure that it is a sustainable model where people can get rewarded on the job and support their families and have a prosperous future. So it's a great case study, a great model, and a lot of it revolves around public-private partnership. The Indonesian government now owns 51% of the shares of our Indonesian subsidiary, and it's a wonderful partnership in that we share risk and rewards, and we share a common alignment and vision for how to sustain an operation well into the future. To your question about small and medium enterprises, that's been very important in the development of this operation. We provide training, and we get a lot of innovation out of SMEs, a lot of innovation coming from small businesses. Women-owned businesses is very important across our operations globally. We provide training, and we get a big return on those investments back from these small and medium business enterprises that provide services to our business and operations. So in the mining industry, you have to be resilient. There's ups and downs with commodity prices, but it's collaboration with communities, with all of our stakeholders that really wins the day on whether we're successful or not. And like I said, we've been operating here in Indonesia for over 55 years, and my guess is that there'll be another 55 years ahead of us. We'll see more and more women into the workplace, different kinds of jobs, digitalization, women doing different jobs that aren't traditional mining, a lot more science and technology and innovation coming into our business. So it's a great opportunity, not only for our company, but all stakeholders and all of our employees. Thank you very much.
It's an incredibly powerful example. You know, as we get close on time, we've covered a lot of ground in the first round, and I thought what I might do is rather than individual questions, is maybe ask you all the same question, which is, as you think of leaving B20, we think about this notion of driving growth that is inclusive. What's one hope that you have that actually comes out of these last 2 days? Maybe Alan, I could start with you.
The need for high quality economic growth to continue to lift people out of poverty and create prosperity cannot be decoupled from the challenge of a climate and nature emergency and rampant social inequality around the world. And my hope is that as we think about growth, we also think about the environmental and social impact of the growth that we're driving. And Bob, I'd like to commend you on the outstanding report that McKinsey published today that helps bring a framework to deal with those three issues together. That would be my hope.
Thank you. Marie?
Thank you. My hope is that we can achieve green and blue, resilient and inclusive growth. Growth without these three dimensions is not going to be resilient or helping us to deal with the future, including climate change, including addressing the reversal of development that we experience with these multiple crises, human capital being one of them. So there's a huge reversal in human capital, including on women that we talked about earlier. This has to be addressed and prioritized, as with climate. With climate, we are already in crisis. You cannot reverse it. The inaction is going to lead to increased vulnerability and increased lack of inclusiveness, because it hits the vulnerable and the poor the most. So we need, I agree totally with Alan that we need to really address climate, but at the same time development. So and we can do it. And I heard a lot of good ideas at the B20 here. Let's just do it and implement.
Hear, hear. Roy?
Look, Bob, I'm incredibly optimistic. I think over the course of the last couple of days, what I've heard through various panels and discussions is that there is a meeting of the minds, there is a common agreed viewpoint that we can't deal with this big issue unless we all lean in and do our part. And I think that includes a realization that yes, we do need growth. This is how we will create equity for many and opportunity for many, but we have to do it in a sustainable way and in a way that actually deals with some of the underlying problems of equity and inequity and issues of inclusion. And I don't think there is anyone that thinks that there is step one, dealing with growth, and then step two, dealing with a sustainable future, and one with equity and inclusion as an afterthought. I think there is a common appreciation, whether it's government, whether it's the private sector, whether it's business leaders, and whether it's, quite frankly, every individual, that we have to, lean in, but then more importantly, we have to tackle all three together: sustainability, growth, and equity and inclusion.
Thank you. Kathleen?
I agree with what all the other panelists said. I would just add that I think it's going to take ongoing collaboration between the public and private sectors to push this forward in a practical, reasonable way, and a way that all of us can execute it. I think everybody's heart is in it. We've all got to collaborate together and figure out how we go about executing.
Well, I just wanted to first say a heartfelt thanks to all of you. Alan, Marie, Roy, Kathleen. We've covered a lot of ground, from the notion of what is equitable compensation to access for all, to the notion of financial inclusion and the power of the markets, small business, the notion of working together. And my takeaway is it's time for the courage of the and as we think about solutions. We have to have a decade that grows, but it has to grow in a way that is inclusive and sustainable. Sustainable, inclusive growth. Thank you all.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you very much, Bob Sternfels, Global Managing Director of McKinsey & Company, for moderating this inspirational and eye-opening sessions. And there are many insights and also data we can gain. One is from Mr. Alan Job. By 2030, everyone in Unilever's value chain, especially suppliers, must pay fair living wage to their employees. And he argued that employees who are paid properly not only would stay and work better, but most importantly, we will create a healthy society. And it's really interesting as well to point out what Ms. Mari Elka Pangestu said about women suffered more during the pandemic. I think we all agree with this. They experienced massive layoff and stay longer out of the job market, and they eat less during the pandemic because they would prioritize their families instead of themselves. And a recent data that I got recently, according to a research published on Feminist Economics Journal, found that women have also been disproportionately affected by job losses, particularly women of color and ethnic minorities. Worldwide, women lost more than 64 million jobs in 2020 alone, resulting in an estimated $800 billion loss on income. All right, ladies and gentlemen, now it's time for us to move on to the next agenda. it is the keynote address by the Minister of Finance of the Republic of Indonesia to give her remarks about restoring global economy through innovative partnership. Without further ado, please welcome Her Excellency Ms. Sri Mulyani.
Thank you so much. All Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen from the B20 Summit, first of all, I would like to express my appreciation for inviting me for this very important meeting. And I would like to also congratulate B20 for having a very successful meeting. This is really a remarkable after pandemic, and we have now able to host you here, and I can see that the room full with all of you. I do hope that your business is going to be continue, prosper, and growing, just like what we just discussed in this panel. So allow me to have this keynote speech. I'm actually asking Sinta, and this is maybe almost the end of your session, so maybe you just want to wrap and going out and then enjoy the beach, having a coffee with your friends. But believe me that my speech is going to be important for you and your business. So bear me a little bit with this one. I think we all agree that the global economy has been facing extremely difficult challenges, leading to a deterioration of the growth prospect with higher probability of recession in many countries. The COVID-19 has created this kind of very unique and challenging situation for recovery. Our ability to manage, especially in managing the spread of the COVID with the vaccine, are able to at least creating a momentum of recovery. But we still cannot let our guard down as global economic risks have been shifted toward various economic shocks that threatening the global economic environment. As we are all following that the IMF has projected that the economic growth significantly decelerated from 6% projected in 2021, 6% which is already achieved, now to only 3.2% in 2022, and further deteriorated to 2.7% in 2023. The consistent downward revision of global outlook from all international institutions have marked the increasing risk we face this year. Multiple factors have fueled this condition, factors such as the war in Ukraine that has aggravated the already soaring inflationary pressure, and the slowdown in the big economy, including China, and much tighter monetary policy to fight inflation. The major near-term challenges becoming much more complex and highly interrelated. Prolonged high inflationary pressure, energy and food insecurity, financial pressure, debt distress, and geopolitical fragmentation. This is definitely not an easy environment for all economic actors, for all of you, and also for policymakers. But I do agree that we have to address the root cause. Bringing down inflation should become the main focus to avoid longer-term damage and restore stability. The situation lately is so delicate that confidence in the financial sector and market and overall economy can be easily deterred if we are not carefully with our policy formulation. And many policymakers are actually now facing with a very narrow room to maneuver, whether this is fiscally and monetary. For us, at least in Indonesia case, we are working very closely together between fiscal policy and monetary policy in a synchronized and harmonized way. The policy need to continue to be well calibrated, well planned, well communicated, sometimes quickly adjusted, but still need to be continued consistent and credible. We also need to effectively use all variable tools to prevent economic confidence failing further. We have to provide well-targeted support, and especially because of the policy space becoming limited, it should be more targeted, especially in protecting the poor and vulnerable. So I'm glad I'm hearing the panel just before my speech that many big companies like Unilever, Freeport, really hopefully looking more in the inclusive growth of your company. This is aligned well with also the government, who try to continue maintaining the momentum of the recovery through inclusive policy formulation and policy tool, using our fiscal space selectively, especially in managing the shock and protecting the vulnerable. So I do hope the CEO of the B20 Summit here, you are all also using your corporate space to really creating a better inclusive growth. We also have to provide appropriate support for productive activity, because at the end of the day, the economy which is growing will require and will need increasing productivity, and sometimes the innovation which is not yet sure but need to be supported, and improvement of the business climate so that job creation remain happening and the economic growth continue to be sustained. For Indonesia, we are continue maintaining the optimism, but at the same time also keep vigilance with a very dynamic global environment. Optimism is still important, while at the same time, vigilance has to be warranted. This is the mindset of Indonesia economic policy maker. We are not scaring you by saying that we need to be vigilant. Vigilance means that you have to prepare for any possibility, any eventuality, and you are not actually deterred by this any possibility. You are focused and you continue recalibrated your policy choices. Our economic recovery continue progressing. As you can see, our third quarter growth is 5.72%. This is slightly higher than what the government own expectation. We have already continued growing above 5% for 4 consecutive quarters, from last quarter 2021 and continue to 2022 third quarter. The continued strong economic recovery has been supported by our strong domestic demand, especially on a consumption, but also now followed by the recovery of the investment. But we also quite lucky enjoying the buoyancy of the export growth. Our effective pandemic handling and various policy support, both to demand, especially in the form of social assistance and subsidy, has protected the economy and the people from a huge shock, including food and energy prices. On the other hand, we also using our policy tool to support the supply side. This is in the form of tax relief, some incentive, and also in this case, financing support. Combination of these two should be always in the right blend, because the economy is not in one simple challenge or problem. So we have to continue recalibrated our policy. Selective, targeted, but also at the same time be very pragmatic. Stronger economic activity has sustained and improved our labor market condition. The unemployment rate, which is increased to 6.5% in August 2021, now has been declined to 5.9% in August 2022. This is a good record from both growth as well as the inclusiveness of this growth, including also in poverty reduction. But we are not, in this case, complacent with this good, strong achievement. We continue working hard, focusing on the new emerging risk which is coming from the global economy. Price stability is one of the most important and strategic focus at this very moment. This is not only the work of the monetary policy, because we understand that the price increase, it is not only coming from aggressive aggregate demand, but also coming from the supply disruption. So we try to be very meticulous in designing which instrument should addressing the area of the aggregate demand expansion using the monetary policy, light increasing interest rate and a little bit tightening. But mostly we are going to be also addressing the issue on the supply side, whether this is on the stock, logistical, distribution, and of course availability. With those kind of coordination, which is even led by President Jokowi himself, together with the leaders of the region, like governor and mayor, as well as using tools, both fiscal and monetary side. On the fiscal side, we even providing reward for a governor or municipal mayor that can beat the inflation in a much aggressive way, even below the national inflation level. We reward it by real money. So it's not just giving piagam. And that's really powerful because we're announcing to the public that make everybody focus on how we are going to address the potential price increase which is coming from disruption in the supply side. With that effort, our inflation is actually slowing down to 5.7%. This is even after the government increasing the fuel price by 30% back in September. We even have deflation in the food from September as well as in October. That kind of collaboration between non-conventional policy with the conventional policy instrument is really needed when we are facing with this very complex and challenging task. The government will continue to step up effort to continuously boost the recovery, while at the same time we also preserving stability amid the very increasing and elevating external risk. We also strengthening our collaboration and coordination with the Monetary Authority, Bank Indonesia, and Financial Sector Authority like OJK and Deposit Insurance in the Financial System Stability Committee. We look carefully how this global economic dynamic and risk can affect the stability of our financial system. We learn a lot from 97-98 financial crisis and 2008-2009 global financial crisis. On the fiscal side, we will continue committed to gradual fiscal consolidation. This is the bedrock of the credibility of macro policy. This is not ideology, but this is necessary condition for Indonesia to continue move forward in a sustainable and credible way. We are now enjoying some commodity boom revenue, and we are going to save some of it in order for us to be able to create a safety net for 2023, which is becoming even more unpredictable. So ladies and gentlemen, Despite the resiliency of the Indonesia economy, we continue calling for collective global action, because the nature of the problem that the global economy is facing is actually the one that cannot be addressed and overcome by any country alone. When you talk about pandemic, climate change, or even digital technology that can provide opportunity, but also sometimes also a risk in terms of instability, and of course, geopolitics. Within the G20 presidency, we continue maintaining this spirit of cooperation and collaboration. The spirit of peace, solidarity, multilateralism that should need to be continued strengthened. Differences in terms of position should not breaking the spirit of cooperation. We use this G20 presidency to continue communicating that the world needs even more cooperation rather than divided. This is good not only for the G20 but also for the whole world. And Alhamdulillah, in this case, as a finance minister, we were able to deliver a finance track with all very tangible and concrete results, which can hopefully creating a confidence not only to the G20 forum, but also for the global economy. We are hoping that this week, the Leaders Summit is going to also providing with this kind of result that can restore and strengthen the confidence of the global economy. In this case, I would like to express my appreciation for the B20 as one of the most prominent engagement group in G20. You've been also engaging very actively. Business, networking, and relationship is actually the one who can soften the tension at the geopolitical level as well as security threat. I do hope that the B20 will continue maintaining this spirit of collaboration and cooperation and voicing that to the world and especially to the leaders. Your role and your voice is very, very important. This case, Indonesia also continue in performing the G20 presidency, listen to the private partners on challenge and how we can promote partnership in a better way. We noted some challenges in the area of long-term priority and targets, data and standard, the need to a better enabling environment, and capacity to invest in innovation. The four main challenges require a collaboration effort between the government, private sector, donors, as well as MDB. The G20 delivered the framework on how to best leverage private sector participation, particularly to scale up sustainable infrastructure investment. The infrastructure funding and sustainability financing, those very, very important for all countries, whether you are advanced country, emerging country, or low-income country. I believe B20 has thought on how we can improve our way of having a partnership in order to accelerate economic development. The message we have heard today will be also critical to the next stage of our work and also for the next presidency of G20. We hope we can continue explore many creative ways to advance innovative, inclusive, and collaborative growth. Inclusivity cannot be attained with just the discussion. It needs to be implemented, and we should use all the tools, instruments, as well as our affirmative action in order for us to be able to achieve higher growth, better quality, and more inclusive as well as equitable. I would like to thank B20 for having me to provide this speech at the later of this afternoon. I do hope that you are all having a very productive meeting continuously, as well as enjoying Bali while you stay here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bu Sri Mulyani, the Minister of Finance of the Republic of Indonesia. A very powerful message indeed, that collective global action is needed because no country can deal with this crisis alone, and the world needs more cooperation rather than division. Now, ladies and gentlemen, moving forward to the next session, it is a pleasure for me to call upon the Executive Chairman of the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change to deliver his remarks virtually with the topic Investing in Inclusive Growth for a Resilient Future. Without further ado, please welcome Mr. Tony Blair.
Good morning from me. Good afternoon to you. It's a real honor and privilege to be able to address these words at the B20 conference. To start by saying a big congratulations to President Jokowi and all the Indonesian government for the tremendous leadership they've shown through the G20 process, and also to say to the B20, with whom my institute has worked closely, well done. You've set a new standard, I think, for B20 gatherings, and it's a real pleasure to be with you all. So the title of this is Inclusive Growth for a Resilient Future. And we start, I think, with this context. Today, growth and inclusivity go together. Now, maybe in the 19th century industrial revolution, that wasn't always the case, where people could use unskilled labor to produce goods and machinery. But today we're living through a new revolution, a 21st century technology revolution. And there, the premium is on people who are educated, are capable of developing the skills for the future, and who understand the way this technology revolution will operate. So what that means is the following. Number one, we need to use the talents of all the people. That's why discrimination today, whether on the grounds of gender or race or religion, is not just morally wrong. It also negates the possibility of growth. We need to use all the skills of all the people, and that includes our women as well. So the important thing today is to recognize that we live in an entirely new economy. Use the talents of all the people means also educating the people, educating them well, educating them to a high level of achievement. And to do that education requires an understanding of this technology revolution. Because the second point is that technology today is going to change everything. The way we live, the way we work, the way we think, the way we interact with each other. And it changes not just the way manufacturing works and services work, but it also changes agriculture through irrigation, through new types of seed, through the ability, through technology, to access markets more efficiently. And if we want to utilize that technology revolution, then the third thing we need is connectivity. So we need the infrastructure available to allow people to be joined up. We need electricity and power, including for the hundreds of millions of people in the world who don't presently have it. If you take the Pelapa Ring project, for example, in Indonesia, not so very far from where you are, that's producing connectivity for a population that doesn't have it. It opens up opportunity for them. This, therefore, means higher growth, but it requires investment. And investment not just in things like education and infrastructure, but the fourth point is healthcare becomes an important part of an inclusive economy. We've seen through COVID how much damage a pandemic can do, not just to people's health, 15 million excess deaths worldwide, but to our economic performance. trillions of dollars lost through the pandemic. And the World Bank estimates that if we produce better health, it will add trillions more to the global economy. So good health equals better productivity equals higher growth. Our campaign that we've been working on with the B20 in Indonesia, which is called the One-Shot Campaign, it's about how you utilize the whole new generation of drugs and injectables to mean that we produce better healthcare for people, particularly in the developing world. That's an example of how, by utilizing the best available healthcare today, we produce more growth and more inclusive growth. However, the fifth point is we know something else. And that is today the changes in climate are producing greater inequality and poorer outcomes in health. This is why we have to aim today to make our growth as green and sustainable as possible, because that is going to be the future. Climate change hits the poorest in the world hardest. You can see this today if you look at the Horn of Africa and the drought, and therefore the displacement of people, people going without food, people dying as a result of not having access to water. So the growth that we produce, if it is to be inclusive, has also got to be sustainable. And six, for all of this, we need a thriving partnership between the public and the private sector. One of the interesting things that Sri Mulyana just talked to you about was how it's important to have this spirit of cooperation, operating not just at an international level, but also within countries. Today, we know that if countries open up to each other more through trade, it produces jobs, it produces better outcomes. But we also know that within countries, it's important that spirit of cooperation is there between the public sector, with its weight and its ability to influence policy, and the private sector, with its enterprise and its commitment to good business. So ensuring that we get a good business environment, one in which people can start businesses and thrive, that is also an essential part of higher growth and growth that is inclusive. And so this is the way that we give ourselves the best chance of ensuring that we produce growth, but growth that involves as many people as possible from all different walks of life and all different parts of our economy. And if you look at the nations that have made it to first world status, then by and large, we don't always succeed, but we're always striving to ensure that as many people as possible are included in our economy. And this is also the route to political stability, because if people feel they have a stake in the future, if people feel that the economy is not just for a small group of people at the top, but for a broad mass of people, if they think if they work hard, they can do well, they can succeed, that gives them a stake in the future. That gives them the ability to think this economy is for me and not just for others. And there is where I have to congratulate Indonesia for the changes they're making over the past few years. And it's a great example of how, with the right political leadership under President Jokowi, a country can make real progress. For example, the new capital city at Nusantara is precisely in order to make sure that the development of Indonesia in the future is not limited to Java and to Jakarta, to the big traditional urban areas. And then we have the hugely imaginative plan that Indonesia has for combining growth and clean energy. So Kadin, the Indonesian Chamber of Commerce, have produced an idea for a green energy fund. If you look at the electric vehicle chain, LG Energy Solutions is making a $10 billion investment into the battery sector. 70% of the nickel is going to be processed in Indonesia, and there's a huge factory being built at Karawang. So this is a classic example of a country using its resources to produce growth in a sustainable way that will also be inclusive. So I think at this moment in time, despite all the headwinds the global economy faces, if you take a step back and look at the broad sweep of history, it's very clear that the times through which we're living now require governments to commit to growth that is inclusive, that utilizes all the talents, that allows people to access the benefits of the technology revolution, that creates the right infrastructure, pays attention to healthcare, has the climate and the climate changes at the very center of policy making, and within all of that has that spirit of cooperation between public and private sector and between countries together forming the global community. So I think this is a really important moment for the B20 to have this conference. I really do think it's done a magnificent job in putting together the elements that go to make up for a better 21st century for all of us. And I just want to say it's been an absolute pleasure and privilege and honor for my institute to work with the B20 and indeed with the Indonesian government to be part of this exciting story. I know there'll be a lot of other things that may overshadow parts of the G20 this year, but this agenda developed in Indonesia is one of the most exciting things that's happened in the international community for many years, and I commend the B20 for it. Thank you very much.
The Executive Chairman of the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change, former British Prime Minister, Mr. Tony Blair. Thank you so much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, after a very long and insightful keynote and also panel discussions, now we'll be having a very short coffee break, and you're welcome to enjoy the coffee and snacks at the mezzanine floor. And please come back by 4:30 p.m. It is really important for us to come back to this ballroom by 4:30 p.m. because we will be listening to 3 state leaders speaking before us. Prime Minister of Canada, His Excellency Mr. Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister of Australia, His Excellency Mr. Anthony Albanese, and of course, the host President of the Republic of Indonesia, His Excellency Mr. Joko Widodo. Once again, please do enjoy your coffee and also snack at the mezzanine floor. And please, would like to have your cooperation and be on time to return to this ballroom by 4:30
Bapak, ini di sela-sela agenda yang padat menyempatkan untuk datang ke media center. Baik, teman kumparan, ya saat ini masih berlangsung B20 Summit Indonesia dan ada networking break yang berlangsung saat ini, di mana setelah networking break ini akan ada agenda selanjutnya menuju closing B20 Summit Indonesia. Dan saat ini sudah ada 2 rekan jurnalis saya, ada Alia Bunga dan juga ada Jemima yang akan melaporkan terkait bagaimana pertemuan Presiden Joko Widodo bersama dengan Joe Biden dan kemudian bagaimana rencana atau agenda dari B20 Summit Indonesia selanjutnya, di mana ini merupakan hari terakhir B20 Summit sebelum akhirnya besok dan lusa akan diselenggarakan acara puncak untuk KTT G20. Saya akan menyapa Alia Bunga. Alia.
Baik, Melisa, halo.
Halo Alia. Baik, Alia, apa saja yang mungkin bisa diinformasikan terkait dengan talking points atau hasil pertemuan dari Presiden Joko Widodo bersama dengan Presiden Joe Biden, Alia?
Baik, Presiden Jokowi dengan Presiden Biden hari ini melakukan pertemuan bilateral yang cukup singkat, Melisa. Dan meskipun agak sedikit sulit untuk mendengar apa yang dibicarakan oleh kedua pemimpin, tetapi saya berhasil mengumpulkan beberapa informasi penting terkait apa saja yang dibicarakan oleh kedua pemimpin tersebut. Yang pertama, di awal pembicaraan mereka, Presiden Jokowi menyambut Presiden Biden dengan antusias. Dia juga mengapresiasi kehadiran Biden ke Bali dan juga turut meramaikan G20, mohon maaf, dan mereka juga berencana akan bertemu lagi esok hari di KTT G20 pertemuan pertama tanggal 15 November. Seperti yang sudah kita ketahui, Presiden Biden telah tiba di Nusa Dua Bali tadi malam dan langsung akan bertemu dengan Presiden Joko Widodo esok harinya lagi. Lebih lanjut, kedua pemimpin juga membicarakan perihal pentingnya di US-Indonesia Strategic Partnership yang turut berdampak pada kemakmuran serta keamanan kawasan Indonesia Pasifik. Mereka berdua juga membicarakan soal komitmen Amerika Serikat kepada ASEAN dan support kepada ASEAN Outlook on the Indo-Pacific. Dan juga Biden menyinggung soal Indonesia yang akan segera menjadi ketua ASEAN selanjutnya, menyusul sebelumnya Kamboja, dan pada tahun depan Indonesia akan kembali memegang keketuaan ASEAN. Begitu, Melissa.
Baik, Alia, tadi juga di sesi panel diskusi ada talking points atau ada recording video dari Anne Hathaway. Boleh diinformasikan apa saja poin-poin atau hal penting yang dibicarakan oleh Anne Hathaway dalam B20 Summit Indonesia ini?
Oke, Anne Hathaway memutuskan untuk hanya merekam video yang tadi ditampilkan di sesi dialog, dan Duta Pemberdayaan Perempuan Perserikatan Bangsa-Bangsa itu juga membicarakan tentang pemberdayaan perempuan tentunya, apalagi di masa pandemi seperti saat ini, Melissa. Jadi pointersnya adalah Anne Hathaway menekankan bahwa perempuan itu sangat penting bagi pertumbuhan ekonomi, khususnya ketika pandemi. Yes, sebab perempuan menjadi salah satu kelompok yang paling rentan akibat pandemi, dan mereka kita perempuan sering harus di rumah dan juga tidak berpartisipasi dalam pertumbuhan ekonomi dan sebagainya. Jadi perempuan cenderung di saat pandemi ini kehilangan pekerjaan lebih sering atau lebih banyak dibandingkan laki-laki, dan itu adalah sebuah masalah yang harus kita tanggulangi, yaitu dibicarakan oleh forum B20 ini untuk mengajak para partisipan sadar bahwa wah, perempuan ini memang harus dilibatkan sesungguhnya gitu. Dan secara ironisnya, kayak ketika lagi sekarang sedang pandemi, justru peran perempuan ini yang sangat penting, seperti pemberian vaksin untuk tenaga medis dan lain-lain, itu kebanyakan dari perempuan, sementara perempuannya sendiri kurang dilibatkan gitu dalam pertumbuhan ekonomi ini. Maka dari itu bagi Hathaway penting untuk melibatkan perempuan dalam sektor perekonomian, karena ini menurut saya yang saya paling setuju apa yang dia bilang adalah karena hal ini akan membuat kita lebih kuat, sukses, dan lebih bahagia secara global begitu.
Baik. Terima kasih Alia Bunga yang melaporkan langsung dari area Nusa Dua Bali, di mana di area ini juga diselenggarakan B20 Summit. Dan kita juga sudah ada jurnalis kumparan, tepatnya di depan kawasan Media Center untuk B20 dan G20 ini. Saya akan ke Jemima. Jemima, selanjutnya ini menuju closing B20 Summit. Apa saja agenda yang akan dilakukan dan apa legacy program dari B20 Summit Indonesia ini?
Ya, baik, terima kasih Melissa. Saya melaporkan langsung dari kawasan Nusa Dua di Bali. Jadi sebelumnya kita sedang berada di networking break ya. Networking break ini memberikan ruang bagi komunitas bisnis global untuk berjejaring, untuk berdiskusi, dan untuk berkolaborasi. Nah, setelah networking break ini, kita nanti akan kembali lagi kepada sesi-sesi berikutnya. Yaitu pertama ada pemaparan dari Ketua Umum Kamar Dagang dan Industri Indonesia atau KDI Indonesia, Arsyad Rashid. Dia akan menjelaskan bagaimana presidensi Indonesia ini mendorong prioritas-prioritas global. Kemudian nanti ada juga presentasi dari komunitas hasil dari B20 Summit ini yang disampaikan oleh Ketua Forum B20 Indonesia, Shinta Kamdani. Nah, di sini dia akan menjelaskan bagaimana komunitas ini nanti akan meliputi 25 rekomendasi kebijakan, 68 policy actions, dan 4 legacy programs. Nah, sebelumnya saya sudah menjelaskan tentang rekomendasi kebijakan dan policy program. Nah, tapi ditekankan dalam B20 Summit ini bahwa kita tidak hanya memberikan rekomendasi-rekomendasi, tetapi juga menerjemahkan rekomendasi ini menjadi aksi. Nah, kemudian dalam legacy program ini sudah untuk visi transisi hijau, nantinya B20 ini akan menciptakan apa yang disebut dengan Carbon Center of Excellence yang berguna sebagai knowledge hub dan juga practice sharing center, yaitu pusat untuk berbagi pengetahuan dan juga praktik-praktik dalam relasinya dengan transisi hijau. Kemudian dalam relasinya dengan inklusivitas, nanti akan ada B20 Wiki, yang isinya adalah Wikilearn, Wikido, dan Wikiscale. Ini akan membantu UMKM untuk mendorong bisnis mereka. Kemudian masih dalam inklusivitas, ada juga yang disebut dengan One Global Women Empowerment. Nah, ini gunanya adalah untuk mendorong pengusaha-pengusaha perempuan. Nah, begitu Mbak. Nah, setelah itu, nanti akan juga, nah itu setelah pemaparan dari komunitas B20 ini, akan dilanjutkan dengan Summit Closing Keynote Address dari Presiden Jokowi Widodo. Nah, kita nantikan bersama-sama ya, Mbak Lisa. Baik, terima kasih Jemima yang juga melaporkan langsung dari kawasan Nusa Dua Bali. Dan terima kasih juga Alia Bunga yang juga melaporkan dari sekitar area venue atau main hall B20 Summit Indonesia. Kita berjumpa lagi besok Alia Bunga dan Jemima untuk melaporkan terkait acara puncak KTT G20. Terima kasih, thank you girls. Terima kasih Melsa. Baik, teman kumparan, selanjutnya Chair of B20 sekaligus Ketua Umum Kamar Dagang dan Industri atau Kadin Indonesia Arsyad Rashid tadi menyempatkan diri untuk datang ke Media Center tempat saya berdiri saat ini untuk mengucapkan apresiasi dan rasa terima kasih kepada para jurnalis yang bukan hanya berasal dari Indonesia saja, tapi dari luar Indonesia yang datang untuk meliput B20. Dan di sela-sela kegiatannya tersebut, Arsyad Rashid mengatakan bahwa peluang investasi terus bertambah dalam B20 Summit ini, di mana B20 Summit ini sudah berlangsung selama 2 hari, dan kalau kemarin menurut informasi dana investasi yang terkumpul itu sejumlah sekitar 75 triliun rupiah. Nah, tadi menurut Ketua Umum Kadin Indonesia, dana investasi yang terkumpul sudah senilai 100 triliun rupiah. Dan kita akan saksikan bersama-sama bagaimana interview kami dengan Ketua Umum Kadin Indonesia Arsyad Rashid di sela-sela kegiatannya mengunjungi Media Center siang tadi.
Bapak, ini di sela-sela agenda yang padat menyempatkan untuk datang ke Media Center begitu ya, untuk memberikan apresiasi kepada jurnalis. Pertanyaan dari kumparan Pak, sejauh ini kan sudah ada, kalau kemarin update-nya sudah ada sekitar 18 MOU yang ditandatangani dengan nilai sekitar 75 triliun. Sejauh ini bagaimana Pak, ada perkembangan?
Ada berkembang terus, setiap hari akan nambah terus karena kita dorong terus untuk supaya memastikan lebih banyak investasi dan lebih banyak perdagangan dengan Indonesia. Target kita bersama secara negara adalah 2.200 triliun. Pak Bali sebagai Menteri Investasi, kami sebagai Kadin, dan semua bergotong royong, semua menteri juga bergotong royong, Pak Menko Luhut, Pak Menko Erlangga, dan semua, Ibu Retno, luar negeri juga terus, karena ini kita akan seperti Pak Jokowi mengatakan, sekarang ada diplomasi ekonomi, jadi kita memastikan lebih banyak investasi supaya lapangan pekerjaan itu bisa lebih banyak lagi, karena kuncinya itu adalah daripada yang namanya prosperity ataupun kesejahteraan.
Baik, Pak, singkat saja, apakah menurut Bapak ini benar-benar B20 Summit Indonesia ini bisa benar-benar menggerakkan perekonomian global ke depan gitu dengan
paling sedikit memberi kontribusi. Saya yakin itu karena paling sedikit kita mau mengatakan jangan lupakan negara-negara berkembang. Kita membicarakan conversation negara berkembang supaya ini bisa memastikan bahwa dunia ini bisa maju secara inklusif. Makanya saya kata inklusif growth.
Inclusive growth. Thank you so much. Terima kasih Bapak Melisa dari. Thank you so much.
Thank you, appreciate it. Thank you ya. Thank you ya.
Bukan hanya peluang pendanaan investasi yang menjadi fokus dalam B20 Summit Indonesia ini, tapi juga mengenai pandemic fund yang tentunya ini menjadi perhatian khususnya dari Menteri Keuangan Republik Indonesia Ibu Sri Mulyani begitu ya, dalam wawancara eksklusif bersama Kumparan juga sudah sempat menjelaskan mengenai pandemic fund ini yang dikumpulkan dalam gelaran KTT G20 di Indonesia ini begitu. Menurut Menteri Keuangan Republik Indonesia Ibu Sri Mulyani, tentunya ini sebagai salah satu wujud nyata untuk bagaimana negara-negara anggota G20 ini bersama-sama mendorong atau berusaha untuk mengantisipasi pandemi yang masih akan terus berlanjut, dan bagaimana agar negara-negara anggota G20 ini bisa bersama-sama recover together dan recover stronger. Untuk mengetahui seputar pandemic fund dalam G20 sejauh ini, kita saksikan tayangan berikut ini.
Presiden Joko Widodo meluncurkan Pandemic Fund dalam rangkaian KTT G20 di Nusa Dua Bali hari Minggu kemarin. Pandemic Fund merupakan langkah mitigasi pandemi yang melibatkan berbagai negara.
First, thanks to the Indonesian presidency for organizing this event.
Saat ini sudah ada 15 kontributor atau funding countries, baik negara anggota G20 maupun non-G20, termasuk Indonesia dan berbagai foundation atau NGO internasional. Diketahui pembiayaan dalam Pandemic Fund membutuhkan dana sebesar 31,1 miliar dolar Amerika Serikat per tahunnya. Namun saat ini baru terkumpul 1,4 miliar dolar Amerika Serikat.
And operation of the Pandemic Fund.
Untuk itu G20 telah sepakat untuk membentuk dana pandemi bagi kepentingan pencegahan, persiapan, dan respon terhadap pandemi. Saya menyampaikan terima kasih kepada para donor dari negara-negara anggota G20 dan non-G20, serta dari lembaga-lembaga filantropi yang telah memberikan kontribusi. Namun, dana yang terkumpul masih belum mencukupi. Saya mengharapkan dukungan yang lebih besar lagi untuk dana pandemi ini.
Teman kumparan tidak main-main, sekitar 1 tahun terakhir ini Indonesia tentunya disibukkan dan difokuskan pada gelaran KTT G20 di mana Indonesia menjadi presidensi tahun ini, di mana tahun depan India yang akan menjadi presidensi untuk KTT G20 berikutnya. Dan berbicara mengenai acara puncak KTT G20 yang akan berlangsung pada besok hari dan juga lusa selama 2 hari, tanggal 15 sampai 16 November 2022. Sebenarnya apa manfaat pastinya untuk Indonesia, terutama yang menjadi presidensi G20 kali ini? Kita simak tayangan berikut ini.
Presiden Jokowi beserta jajarannya selalu menekankan pentingnya persiapan G20 sampai ke detail-detailnya, dan berkali-kali turun langsung untuk cek lokasi. Nampaknya sebagai tuan rumah, pemerintah Indonesia sangat ingin jalannya rangkaian kegiatan G20 2022 berlangsung semaksimal mungkin sukses. Hal ini tidak mengherankan akibat banyaknya topik yang dibahas dalam G20. Sebelum konferensi tingkat tinggi di Bali, terdapat berbagai kelompok kerja di bidang bisnis, buruh, masyarakat sipil, parlemen, sains, audit keuangan, riset, pemerintah kota, perempuan, dan pemuda. Selain itu terdapat pula pertemuan antara para menteri di bidangnya masing-masing. Jadwal G20 sangat padat dan terdiri dari sangat banyak tamu. Tercatat lebih dari 20.000 delegasi datang ke Indonesia untuk bertamu. Dengan rangkaian acara yang beragam dan anggarannya yang besar, sebenarnya apa sih yang pernah dicapai G20? Ternyata G20 pernah ikut menangani berbagai permasalahan keuangan seperti krisis keuangan global tahun 2008, dengan membentuk sistem baru agar tragedi tersebut tidak terulang kembali. Dan kerjasama agar para pengusaha tidak dapat menghindari dari pajak dengan cara membawa kekayaan ke luar negeri, dengan cara saling bertukar informasi dan mengetatkan proses pajak. Selain itu, G20 juga membantu penanganan pandemi COVID-19. Misalnya melalui deklarasi Riyadh yang berkomitmen untuk mengumpulkan dana sebesar lebih dari 5 triliun dolar Amerika untuk pembiayaan penyelesaian pandemi dan penyelesaian-penyelesaian lainnya. Nah, tahun ini, giliran Indonesia untuk menjamu negara-negara G20 untuk berkumpul dan bertemu untuk mencoba menyelesaikan masalah bersama. Ini adalah untuk pertama kalinya Indonesia menjadi tuan rumah sejak berdirinya G20, dan kesempatan ini baru ada lagi pada 20 tahun mendatang. Belum lagi, Indonesia juga menjadi satu-satunya negara ASEAN yang ikut dalam keanggotaan G20 dan memiliki pasar yang besar dan daya beli yang kuat. Tema yang dibawa Indonesia di G20 tahun ini adalah Recover Together, Recover Stronger. Masalah dan peluang yang ada sekarang antara lain adalah struktur kesehatan global yang perlu diperkuat setelah pengalaman pandemi COVID. Transisi energi agar jadi lebih baik untuk lingkungan. Dan transformasi sektor ekonomi ke ranah digital seperti startup. Indonesia juga berperan aktif dalam beberapa inisiatif, seperti dukungan pengamanan anggaran nasional dalam krisis likuiditas, pertukaran dan hubungan pengetahuan antar negara untuk transfer informasi, dan forum untuk startup unicorn dari berbagai dunia untuk saling bertukar ide. Manfaat presidensi G20 bagi Indonesia sendiri adalah diantaranya pandangan bahwa ekonomi Indonesia kuat dalam krisis, nilai tambah pemulihan ekonomi, pengarahan agenda pembahasan agar berdampak positif bagi Indonesia, kesempatan untuk menunjukkan kepemimpinan di kancah internasional, adanya investasi datang dari luar, dan memperkenalkan produk dan wisata Indonesia kepada dunia internasional. Pada sejarahnya, G20 selalu menjadi ajang untuk berusaha menyelesaikan bersama masalah-masalah yang sedang menghinggapi dunia internasional. Mudah-mudahan tren ini berlanjut dan G20 tahun ini menghasilkan langkah konkret yang signifikan.
G20 adalah sebuah perhelatan penting di mana Indonesia sebagai presidensi memiliki peran yang sangat strategis di dalam menciptakan kolaborasi kerjasama global di bidang ekonomi di antara negara-negara yang memiliki peran sangat besar di dunia ini. Kita tentu berharap bahwa dengan G20 ini Indonesia mampu menciptakan jembatan-jembatan komunikasi sehingga akan memunculkan koordinasi dan kesepakatan dari para leaders atau pemimpin di dalam KTT yang akan berjalan minggu depan. Tanggung jawab Indonesia sangat besar dan selama ini Indonesia telah mendapatkan pengakuan dan pujian mengenai cara kita mengelola pertemuan yang dianggap mampu menciptakan suatu kepercayaan dan kolaborasi yang sangat baik. Kita berharap ini akan menjadi salah satu modal untuk menyelesaikan masalah-masalah dunia yang memang sangat kompleks dan saling terkait dan tali temali. Dan oleh karena itu, apakah ini kita bicara tentang ekonomi global, inflasi, kemungkinan resesi, krisis pangan, krisis energi, geopolitik, dan berbagai masalah potensi krisis keuangan di negara-negara berkembang atau negara miskin. Itulah tanggung jawab Indonesia. Indonesia seperti di dalam konstitusi kita, bahwa Indonesia memiliki tanggung jawab untuk ikut menjaga ketertiban dunia berdasarkan kemerdekaan, perdamaian abadi, dan keadilan sosial. Ini yang sedang kita lakukan dalam forum G20, menjaga ketertiban dunia agar seluruh dunia mampu untuk recover together, recover stronger, pulih bersama-sama dan pulih lebih kuat. Itu solidaritas Indonesia bagi bangsa-bangsa di dunia. Terima kasih.
Baik, teman kumparan, menuju acara puncak KTT G20 besok. Sebenarnya bagaimana sejarah lahirnya KTT G20 dan apa saja dampaknya sejauh ini? Kita saksikan video berikut ini.
Ministers, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, welcome to Indonesia. And I'm so delighted to host this G20 Foreign Ministers meeting in Bali, the island of God.
Belakangan, pemerintah disibukkan dengan rangkaian konferensi tingkat tinggi G20 yang berpuncak pada 15-16 November 2022 di Bali. Sebenarnya, apa sih G20 yang sering diobrolin sama pemerintah ini? Memangnya G20 penting bagi masyarakat banyak? Mari kita coba lihat fakta-fakta seputar G20. G20 atau Group of 20 adalah forum kerjasama antara 19 negara dan Uni Eropa untuk membicarakan masalah-masalah yang sedang terjadi di dunia. G20 dibentuk sejak tahun 1999 atas inisiatif anggota G7 untuk merangkul negara lain agar dapat bersama-sama mengatasi krisis global. Keanggotaan G20 kini beragam, mulai dari Amerika Serikat, Tiongkok, Afrika Selatan sampai Indonesia. G20 tidak memiliki ketua ataupun kantor tetap. Oleh karena itu, koordinasi G20 dipegang oleh 3 negara sekaligus. Saat ini koordinasi dipegang Italia, yang mengadakan KTT tahun lalu. Indonesia yang mengadakan tahun ini, dan India yang mendapat giliran untuk tahun depan. Indonesia sendiri resmi jadi presidensi G20 setelah KTT G20 di Italia berakhir tahun lalu. Dengan rumit dan panjangnya prosesi yang berlangsung, seberapa penting rangkaian acara G20? Ternyata cukup penting, karena pemimpin negara yang hadir mewakili mayoritas penduduk dunia dan sebagian besar perdagangan maupun PDB dunia. Forum G20 mencakup 60% populasi dunia, 75% perdagangan global, dan 80% PDB dunia masuk dalam negara-negara anggota G20. Jadi, masalah-masalah yang berkaitan dengan mayoritas penduduk dunia akan dibahas dan dicoba penyelesaiannya di forum penting ini.
The world is changing at unparalleled pace. We are facing increasing pressure from global challenges such as the climate change, food security, and COVID-19 pandemic. Despite these challenges, our world has made great strides in advancing growth. Digitalization, for example, helped micro and small enterprises across the globe build capabilities and increase market access. An unprecedented global collaboration led to a vaccine rolled out that has vaccinated over 60% of the world's population in less than 2 years. The global economy is recovering, and this is our chance to shape a better future for our planet and our people. The B20 is providing the platform to make this happen.
Since its establishment in 2010, the Business 20 or B20 has served as the voice of the business community in the G20 forum. Together, B20 participants are committed to making impact in the world, forcing out their ideas to push private-led economic transformation forward.
B20 business leaders are the front runners in working to solve the biggest global challenges, such as spearheading green transformation, promoting trade and investment, developing infrastructures, leading digital innovation, and advancing equality.
As business leaders in the group of 20, the future relies on you to find lasting solution to our current global challenges and pave the way forward.
This year, Indonesia is honored to be the host of the G20 and B20 summits. As the fourth largest nation, the biggest economy in Southeast Asia, and one of the world's most prominent emerging markets, Indonesia is home to 270 million consumers, 63 million MSMEs, and 12 tech unicorns. Boasting rapid digital growth and emerging sustainable development, Indonesia truly is a land of opportunities. Under this year's theme of advancing innovative, inclusive, and collaborative growth, the B20 stands ready to promote dialogue among business players in G20 countries, provide policy recommendations, and launch initiatives on issues that matter. The themes are aligned with the key messages from inception meeting.
Berharap komunitas B20 akan memberikan tawaran-tawaran konkret yang bisa menjadi bagian dari capaian konkret KTT G20.
And the leadership of governments like Indonesia is going to be absolutely essential in this decisive decade of our climate fight.
It's a great example of how businesses and governments can work together. The B20 plays an important role in spurring more of these collaborations.
The B20 has established several task forces to push progress forward and ensure that we will create recommendations that are actionable, sustainable, and inclusive. These task forces will represent the business community and advocate policy recommendations to the government. In this B20 presidency, we are committed to creating legacy programs that lay foundation for positive, lasting impact across G20 countries, marked by big new ideas, international collaboration, and tangible as well as sustainable impact, prototype in Indonesia and to be scaled globally.
You too can be a part of this movement and make your mark on the future of business and the global economy through our B20 Indonesia. By participating in our legacy programs and B20 events, you will shape strategic moves, making meaningful connections, and collaborate to build a stronger economy together.
We welcome you to become a part of our journey toward a better tomorrow.
Saya menyampaikan selamat kepada Italia yang telah sukses menjalankan presidensi G20 di tahun 2021. Dan Indonesia merasa terhormat untuk meneruskan presidensi G20 tahun 2022. Kami akan menjamu Yang Mulia dan Bapak Ibu di hamparan pantai Bali yang indah yang menginspirasi gagasan-gagasan inovatif untuk produktivitas G20 ke depan. Sampai bertemu di Indonesia, terima kasih.
Pas.
Baik, teman kumparan yang Anda saksikan tadi adalah bagaimana situasi kedatangan dari kepala negara anggota G20, di antaranya ada Presiden Amerika Serikat Joe Biden, kemudian Presiden Turki Erdogan, kemudian Presiden Tiongkok Xi Jinping, dan Menteri Luar Negeri Rusia Sergei Lavrov yang sudah tiba di Bali, Indonesia untuk mengikuti acara puncak KTT G20 besok dan lusa yang akan digelar. Dan saat ini kita akan melihat situasi dan kondisi terkini yang ada di main hall menuju B20 Summit Closing. Kita akan lihat bersama agenda berikutnya sesuai dengan jadwal yang ada adalah Summit Keynote dari Perdana Menteri Kanada Justin Trudeau yang akan memberikan keynote-nya seputar role of the digital economy and industry 4.0 in accelerating a just energy transition, di mana Perdana Menteri Kanada Justin Trudeau ini akan memberikan keynote speech-nya sebentar lagi, dan setelah keynote address dari Justin Trudeau nantinya akan ada summit closing, di mana tentunya ada Ketua Umum Kadin Arsyad Rashid dan juga B20 Communique Presentation dari Chair of B20 Indonesia ada Sinta Kamdani, dan menurut informasi juga Presiden Joko Widodo akan datang memberikan summit closing keynote address-nya dalam B20 Summit Closing ini, dan dengan begitu ini merupakan penutupan dari agenda atau event B20, di mana besok kita akan langsung menyaksikan bagaimana acara puncak KTT G20. Kita langsung ke main hall B20 Summit untuk mendengarkan summit keynote address dari Perdana Menteri Kanada Justin Trudeau. Kita simak bersama teman-teman.
Thank you all for being here. Because it's through conversations like today's that we can better understand what the business community needs to grow the economy and create good jobs for the middle class and people working hard to join it. It's great that the B20 is here in Indonesia this year. Indonesia's rapid growth presents enormous opportunities for investors and businesses. I just arrived from Cambodia, where we announced that we are elevating Canada's relationship with ASEAN to a strategic partnership. This is a strong demonstration of our engagement in the region, and it's part of our plan to expand our economic ties in a big way. Last week, we announced Canada's upcoming Indo-Pacific strategy. L'Indo-Pacifique est la région économique qui connaît la croissance la plus rapide dans le monde. C'est une plaque tournante de plus en plus importante pour le commerce et pour créer de bons emplois aujourd'hui et pour l'avenir. We're deepening our existing friendships in the region, seeking new allies, and promoting stability. And we know that business leaders like you are key to our individual and collective success. We also know that global businesses and commerce need the predictability and reliability that the international rules-based order establishes. This is something that Canada will always stand up for. Canada's message is clear. We have the values that make us a solid, reliable partner. We have the raw materials and trade access, and we have a skilled, educated, ambitious and diverse workforce like no other. We're making major investments in the Indo-Pacific that will strengthen our engagement here in the long term. For example, we're investing in a new Canadian trade gateway in Southeast Asia that will help Canadian businesses expand into new markets, linking them to business networks in this dynamic region. Canada and the Indo-Pacific region also share strong ties between our people, and we'll make these ties even stronger. Today, we're announcing an agreement between Canada and India that will allow an unlimited number of flights between our two countries. By making the movement of goods and people faster and easier, we'll facilitate trade and investment between Canada and India and help our businesses grow and succeed. Tous les enjeux qui comptent pour le monde et pour les Canadiens, que ce soit la sécurité, la prospérité, les droits de la personne, la santé publique ou les changements climatiques, ces enjeux vont être influencés par les relations que le Canada et nos partenaires entretiennent avec les pays de la région Indo-Pacifique. Je suis donc heureux d'être en Indonésie aujourd'hui pour poursuivre ce travail. As you all know, the world is changing fast. And over the past couple of years, we've been facing enormous challenges that are further accelerating this change. During the pandemic, we all had to adjust. Kids and teachers moved their classes online, small businesses shifted to e-commerce, and everyone adapted as best they could. After a virtual G20 in 2020, being able to gather in Rome in person last year gave us hope that things were finally getting back to normal. But of course, that's not exactly what happened, did it? Russia's brutal war in Ukraine is creating food and energy crises. It's disrupting supply chains and raising the cost of living. Families are worried that they're not going to be able to put food on the table or won't be able to heat their homes during winter. These challenges are real, and only through collaboration between business and governments and civil society can we create real, lasting solutions. And technology, if used right, is definitely a tool that will help us build a better future for everyone. But whenever we talk about Industry 4.0 and the prosperity that it can unlock, we have to remember to always put people at the center of everything we do. Technology keeps getting better, and that's great. But at the same time, technology needs to make people's lives better, too. La pandémie a démontré à quel point les technologies jouent un rôle incontournable dans nos vies. Plus que jamais, il faut saisir les occasions que nous offre l'économie numérique si on veut bâtir un avenir plus prospère. Emerging technologies are radically transforming businesses and business models and unleashing new market opportunities. High-tech, quantum, and AI are Canadian strengths. Canada is not only the most educated country in the OECD, but our strong, world-leading immigration policies are attracting highly skilled talent in competitive industries. In fact, Toronto and Vancouver have seen the highest high-tech job growth in North America over the past 2 years. New technologies can make global economies and international trade more accessible for people everywhere. But we have to make sure that the benefits don't just accrue to the wealthiest. On doit s'assurer que les plus petites entreprises et économies peuvent accéder pleinement au marché mondial. We have to make sure that smaller businesses and economies can fully access the global marketplace. If we want to level the playing field, we must cooperate through the sharing of information and best practices. We must identify and develop common standards. For example, Canada is leading on the responsible development and use of artificial intelligence. We're also undertaking major legislative reforms that will strengthen privacy protections for Canadians, including specific provisions to protect children. See, while always ensuring and defending free speech, we must make it clear that it cannot be okay to bully and attack people online. Governments, and especially big technology companies need to safeguard people's data and privacy and address online harassment and violence to ensure trust in technology. At home, we're focused on creating good, sustainable middle-class jobs now and into the future. Canada has some of the best, most talented workers in the world. These are the people with the skills and expertise to power our shared net zero future. I think of the innovators who are launching clean hydrogen projects everywhere from Newfoundland to Alberta. These are the people who will produce the clean energy that Canada will ship to German markets as Europe accelerates its transition to renewables away from Russian oil and gas. I think of our auto workers who are building electric vehicles in Ontario with batteries built in Quebec from nickel and lithium mined in northern Canada. And the steel and the aluminum they're using, also made in Canada, is the cleanest in the world because Canada's electricity grid is already over 80% clean and on our way to 100. Well, and that matters, not just in the fight against climate change, but it matters because increasingly clients and customers are asking to know the impact of their products, of what they're sourcing. It is an imperative, it is a business advantage to be going cleaner and greener. And that's what Canada and so many of you here fully understand. Pour bâtir un avenir carboneutre, nos travailleurs canadiens sont au cœur de notre réussite. Later this year, we'll be releasing our Sustainable Jobs Plan, a roadmap for our own just transition, or in plainer language, our plan to make sure workers have the skills they need to succeed in the economy of today and tomorrow. This builds on years of work our government has been doing to ensure that workers and citizens see that being open to the world can be good for them, not just good for the economy. That's how Canada has been able to avoid the protectionism rising around the world these past few years and sign a record number of trade deals. And that's how Canada remains the only G7 country with a free trade deal with every other G7 country. In Canada, and this is also true here in the Indo-Pacific and around the world, there is a growing demand for circular economy initiatives. Companies view net zero as foundational. This presents an opportunity not only for business development, exports, and partnerships, but for capacity building. Global investors have always thought about Canada for our resources, but you should also think about Canada for our resourcefulness. That's our true competitive advantage. Canada is rapidly becoming the energy and tech supplier a net zero world will need because Canadians have the skills a net zero world will demand. The world is changing fast, but Canada's core values like peace, democracy, stability, respect for human rights are here to stay. In the face of many challenges, like the rising cost of living caused by global inflation, we must continue to put people and workers first. Business leaders like you all know full well that social infrastructure is just as important as building good roads or bridges. In Canada, we're investing in programs like $10 a day childcare to make sure that parents, and especially mothers, don't have to choose between their family and their career. We've made increases to the federal minimum wage. We've made income benefits more generous for low-income workers. Les mesures prises par notre gouvernement ont permis à notre pays de réduire les inégalités de manière historique. Smart business leaders understand that you need to invest in workers and people for you to remain competitive. How you support, empower, retain, and grow your workforce is central to success these days. Well, that's how governments need to think and operate too. When we support the middle class, when we put people at the center of our policies, we create the conditions for growth and the consensus to make real change on issues that matter to everyone, like tackling climate change. And that's what you can always count on from Canada, as together we build a more prosperous world for everyone. Merci beaucoup, mes amis.
Baik, teman kumparan, itu tadi merupakan keynote address dari Perdana Menteri Kanada Justin Trudeau, di mana dia menyebutkan tentang beberapa hal yang juga sebenarnya menjadi poin penting dalam pembahasan G20 atau G20. Justin Trudeau tadi sempat menyinggung tentang business leaders atau para pebisnis yang merupakan kunci terhadap perkembangan ekonomi. Kemudian ia juga menyebutkan bahwa Kanada bisa menjadi solid, reliable partner untuk pengembangan ekonomi ke depan. Dan tadi juga beberapa kali Justin Trudeau menyebutkan soal dunia yang berubah, yang terus berubah dengan cepat. Apalagi ketika pandemi berlangsung 2 tahun yang lalu, situasi memaksa untuk orang-orang ini bekerja dari rumah, sekolah dari rumah. Hal-hal tersebut ini memaksa orang untuk bisa beradaptasi dengan cepat. Kemudian tadi Justin Trudeau juga sempat menyinggung terkait perkembangan teknologi yang sangat membantu perkembangan bisnis dan usaha, di mana hal itu menjadi hal yang cukup relate tentunya dengan para pebisnis dan menjadi hal yang juga diangkat begitu dalam B20 Summit ini. Justin Trudeau juga tadi sempat menyinggung soal masalah climate change yang mendorong manusia untuk memperhatikan produk-produk atau hal-hal apa saja yang bisa mendorong climate change ini menjadi semakin serius. Kemudian dalam akhir pidatonya tadi, Trudeau juga sempat menyebutkan bahwa mendukung middle class atau kaum menengah ke bawah, kemudian menempatkan kepentingan orang banyak dalam setiap kebijakan, ini menjadi hal yang sangat penting untuk dilakukan demi kemajuan ekonomi maupun kemajuan bangsa dan negara-negara yang ada di dunia. Baik, teman kumparan, saat ini di layar monitor Anda masih kita lihat situasi terkini di main hall B20 Summit, di mana ini merupakan closing dari B20 Summit ini yang sudah berlangsung sejak kemarin, 2 hari B20 Summit, dan besok kita akan mengikuti acara puncak dari G20. Dan pada agenda terakhir ini, untuk summit closing nantinya akan ada B20 Presidency 2022, di mana Ketua Umum Kadin, tentunya Arsyad Rashid, ini akan memberikan keynote address-nya juga. Kemudian akan ada B20 Communique presentation dari Chair of B20 Indonesia, yaitu Sinta Kamdani, yang akan berpartisipasi dalam closing B20 Summit ini. Kemudian juga Presiden Joko Widodo ini diagendakan akan membawakan summit closing keynote address dalam penutupan B20 Summit ini. Tentunya setelah pembahasan panel diskusi selama 2 hari ini, seperti yang tadi sudah disebutkan juga bahwa ada peluang dana investasi yang berhasil dikumpulkan untuk tentunya kemajuan perkembangan ekonomi begitu ya, seperti yang tadi Ketua Umum Kadin sempat jabarkan begitu bahwa tentunya peluang dana investasi ini akan terus meningkat. Kalau kemarin ini totalnya sekitar 75, saat ini terus berkembang begitu ya. Kalau kemarin sempat mencapai angka 75 triliun rupiah, maka tadi Ketua Umum Kadin menyebutkan angka tersebut terus bertambah, bahkan mendekati 200 triliun rupiah untuk peluang investasi dalam B20 Summit ini. Baik, teman kumparan, kita akan langsung melihat bagaimana situasi dan kondisi, bagaimana jalannya B20 Summit. Ini tentunya menjadi momen yang luar biasa, pengalaman yang luar biasa untuk presidensi Indonesia tahun ini bisa menjadi tuan rumah baik untuk B20 Summit maupun untuk KTT G20. Dan kumparan tentunya akan melakukan live streaming kembali pada acara puncak KTT G20 pada tanggal 15 dan juga tanggal 16 November 2022 mendatang. Kami akan live streaming di pagi dan sore hari untuk mengabarkan kepada teman kumparan semua bagaimana jalannya KTT G20. Saya Melisa Lolindu dan semua tim yang bertugas pamit undur diri. Kita akan sama-sama menyaksikan bagaimana closing B20 Summit Indonesia. Terima kasih.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated as we're still waiting for the President of the Republic of Indonesia and the Prime Minister of Australia. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated as we're still waiting for the Presidents of the Republic of Indonesia and the Prime Minister of Australia. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to have your cooperation, please. Please be seated as we are still waiting for the arrival of the President of the Republic of Indonesia as well as the Prime Minister of Australia, who will come in a few moments. We would like to have your cooperation. Please be seated as the President of the Republic of Indonesia and the Prime Minister of Australia are coming on their way. Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to have your cooperation. Please be seated as we are still waiting for the Presidents of the Republic of Indonesia and the Prime Minister of Australia. Once again, we would like to have you please be seated as we are still waiting for the Presidents of the Republic of Indonesia and the Prime Minister of Australia. Bapak Ibu, kami juga memohon kerjasamanya untuk mohon duduk dikarenakan Presiden Republik Indonesia dan Perdana Menteri Australia akan segera tiba. Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to have your cooperation to please be seated as the Presidents of the Republic of Indonesia and the Prime Minister of Australia are coming and will be speaking in front of us. To all organizing committee, would you please help us in making sure that all the audiences are seated? To all the organizing committee, would like to have your help in making sure that all the audiences are seated. Thank you. Sekali lagi Bapak Ibu, kami mohon kerjasamanya untuk mohon duduk dikarenakan Bapak Presiden dan juga Perdana Menteri Australia akan segera hadir. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, please, we'd like to have your cooperation. Please be seated as the Presidents of the Republic of Indonesia and Prime Minister of Australia are coming their way. Kepada teman-teman kameramen, kami persilakan untuk kembali ke posisi teman-teman. Teman-teman kameramen yang berada di panggung kecil, kami mohon kerjasamanya untuk kembali ke posisi di belakang. Mohon kerjasamanya ya. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the arrival of the President of the Republic of Indonesia, His Excellency Mr. Jokowi Dodo, and Prime Minister of Australia, His Excellency Mr. Anthony Albanese. Please be seated. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, now we will be listening to a keynote address on B20 joint recommendations towards stronger global recovery by the chair of B20 Indonesia, Ms. Sinta Kamdani.
His Excellency President Jokowi Dodo, the chair of also G20 Indonesia, His Excellency Anthony Albanese, the Prime Minister of Australia, His Excellency Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, esteemed world leaders, business colleagues, and distinguished guests, I salute you all and I thank you for making this possible. I would like to express our immense gratitude to everyone for making the B20 a success. Today, I think back to when our president called on the B20 to collaborate with the G20 to contribute to global economic recovery. I feel privileged to say that together as the B20, we have made recommendation to the G20 which will drive this forward. That is the legacy of B20 Indonesia. Throughout our mandate, we have remained committed to giving businesses a platform for dialogue and supporting G20 governments. Let's look back to where we were in 2020, the great lockdown. Before the pandemic, we thought we knew what challenges we would face, but we didn't see the pandemic coming. No one did. In 2021, we entered a new chapter, the Great Reboot. There was a clear shift from managing the crisis to planning how to emerge from it. Businesses started to innovate to harness new opportunity. We took over the B20 presidency during the time of crisis. Today, we are moving into a new chapter, the Great Rebound. We faced many challenges during our presidency, but now we have an opportunity for a new economic era based on cooperation. It is in that spirit that I'm proud to share with you today the B20 Indonesia Communique, which includes our joint recommendation for G20 leaders. First, we are focusing on innovation to unlock post-crisis growth. This includes opening up digital opportunities across the economy, expanding cooperation for better cybercrime responses, and increasing funds for green infrastructure through innovative financing mechanisms, which accelerate the energy transition. Second, we are pushing for accelerated digital transformation. B20 Indonesia is turbocharging the empowerment of MSME and vulnerable groups by focusing on capability, entrepreneurship, job creation, and the empowerment of women-led MSME. We envision an uplift for workers in the informal economy, included in rural communities. And lastly, to realize a more equitable healthcare architecture, we are bolstering collaboration between developed and developing countries, particularly as we continue to fight to mitigate future global crises by creating guidelines on health emergency preparedness. This year, B20 was incredibly diverse, with 6 task forces and 1 action council member from more than 15 industries across G20 countries. Together, we have reached consensus. I would highlight, we have reached consensus with 25 policy recommendations and 68 policy action. Yes, action, not just recommendations. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, this is just the beginning. It is where we go from here that matters. Beyond policy recommendation, we need to have real impact. We need to set ourselves up for the great rebound. In the spirit of our continued commitment beyond our presidency, B20 Indonesia has created 4 legacy programs. These are inspired by our most pressing priorities: green transition, inclusive growth, and equitable healthcare. Mr. President, you will meet with the G20 leaders tomorrow, and I hope you can advance these priorities to the G20 as a joint vision between government and businesses to achieve collaborative, sustainable, and inclusive growth. Once again, thank you, Mr. President, for your stewardship in this challenging time. You have led many examples and have shown the true spirit of collaboration, inspiring us to develop more innovative ideas and more partnership to jointly drive stronger global recovery. To my chairman, Mr. Arshad Rashid, and the whole Kadin committee, all the task forces, action council, knowledge partner, network partner, and sponsor, thank you for all your hard work. It has been an honor to chair the B20 this year. We have come a long way. We have come a long way for a great rebound. And may we now work together and push the button to go forward and give and pass to India for a better together business and government for collaboration. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ibu Sinta. Ladies and gentlemen, moving forward to our next remarks, it is my pleasure to call upon the Chairman of Indonesian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, or Kadin Indonesia, host of B20 Indonesia, to deliver his remarks, B20 Presidency 2022, Indonesia's leadership in advancing global priorities. To Mr. Arshad Rashid, the stage is yours.
His Excellency Bapak Joko Widodo, the President of the Republic of Indonesia, His Excellency Mr. Anthony Albanese, Prime Minister of Australia, His Excellency and all honorable state leaders and distinguished guests. It is a great honor for me as the host of the B20 Indonesia to address you at this historic occasion. This is the first time that B20 and G20 Summit has been held on Indonesian soil. It is also the first in-person summit since the pandemic. Coming on the heels of the world's emergence from a global pandemic, the Indonesian G20 presidency is timely. This year's G20 presidency takes place against the backdrop of intensified geopolitical polarization, as well as concerns that globalization has failed to affect equitable gain. In my view, Indonesia is uniquely qualified to understand such concern. Our equatorial country, which is literally situated between the global north and south, is a country of contrast. As the only ASEAN country that is permanent member of the G20, Indonesia is able to advocate for both developed and developing economy on the global stage. At the same time, Indonesia has a long tradition of advocating for different voices at the table. Just imagine, on one hand, we are a major global commodities producers. On the other hand, more than 95% of jobs are created by micro, small, and medium enterprises. And while Indonesia is the fastest growing digital economy in Southeast Asia, it is also home to 100 million unbanked people. On top of that, we are a diverse, multi-faith country with more than 17,000 islands. So, the question, how do we bridge our differences and drive consensus? I'll be honest, it hasn't always been easy. But two fundamental Indonesian values that have enabled us to bridge these differences and forge ahead are gotong royong, meaning the spirit of mutual inclusive collaboration to achieve a collective good, and Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, a commitment to achieve unity in diversity. These two concepts have enabled Indonesia to maintain stability and improve prosperity over the last 20 years. We have tried to bring this sense of unity and collaborative action to this year's B20 proceeding. And with this year's, with the support of everyone involved, I do believe we have succeeded. Following the directive of His Excellency, President Joko Widodo, we established three major priorities for this year's B20 Summit in line with G20 priorities that reflects issues of concern to both emerging markets and developed countries. These are the green economy, the empowerment of MSME and women, and the strengthening of global healthcare resilience. These three elements are key to ensuring collective, sustainable, and inclusive growth for all countries. In particular, I would like to highlight this, the first time that MSME has been highlighted as a major B20 topic despite the major role that small businesses play all over the world. With regard to the green economy, B20 Indonesia has already begun to take concrete actions. Within Indonesia, we are actively driving the green transition through various pathways, including industrial decarbonization and facilitating green investment. A carbon center of excellence has been established in the hopes of accelerating global collaboration on net zero initiative. We have also established the first net zero hub in Indonesia to drive and facilitate the private sector's commitment to net zero. The second priority is to promote inclusive growth by empowering MSME and women. To this end, we have established the One Global Women Empowerment Initiative, which aims to facilitate the inclusion of women in the global economy through training, support, guidance, funding, and more. This initiative will be hosted by the International Organization of Employers, which will act as a bridge between successive G20 and B20 presidencies. We have also set in motion a number of MSME initiatives, including a platform that facilitates Indonesian MSMEs to participate in the complex supply chains. Given that MSME account for 60% of Indonesia GDP, this is expected to unlock substantial growth, and we hope that these programs can be replicated elsewhere. The third priority is to create an equitable global healthcare system. B20 Indonesia has mounted the Global One Shot campaign, a campaign that aims to bring together government, industry, and global health organization for the purpose of creating a permanent worldwide vaccination programs. This will help decrease vaccine inequality between the global South and the global North, and help close gaps in health infrastructures across population and region worldwide. As part of increasing healthcare resilience in Indonesia, we also have helped facilitate local manufacturing capabilities for vaccine, strengthening Indonesian pandemic preparedness and response capabilities. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, before I end my remarks, I would like to reemphasize the inclusive development framework I have introduced yesterday. The 5 Ps: peace, prosperity, people, planet, and partnership. As we have passed the baton to India, this framework will remain relevant in advancing global priorities and generating impact beyond G20 countries. In closing, I would like to thank you once again for the chance to report on B20 Indonesia's efforts, and I would like to express my heartiest thanks to all those who have participated in the B20 process throughout the year. Gotong Royong and Bhinneka Tunggal Ika have made this year's B20 Summit a success. And looking ahead, we offer our utmost support to India for next year's summit. Also, we'd like to thank you. Together is a partnership between me and Sinta and everyone at Kadin and all the stakeholders of Indonesia and also the participants of the B20. We, the B20 Indonesia, stands with the G20 to advance innovative, inclusive, and collaborative growth. Let's recover together. Let's recover stronger. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Arshad. Ladies and gentlemen, to continue with our session, please allow me to present a video on the B20 marquee achievements and highlights of our proceedings and commitments.
The G20 economies account for 75% of global trade and 80% of the world's GDP. The Business 20, or the B20, is the business arm of the G20, mandated to cultivate private sector-led transformation to enable the G20 economies to recover together and recover stronger. Together, the B20 Indonesia's Task Forces and Action Council convened a diverse group of business leaders to deliver tangible and comprehensive policy recommendations and B20 communique, providing concrete outcomes and shaping the policy recommendations to enable businesses globally. The B20 Indonesia is also committed to drive 3 key movements that will recourse global trajectory for the better. These are green transition, inclusive growth, and equitable healthcare. It is the decade for the G20 countries to drive green transition, as we account for almost half of the world's share of natural-based solutions. The B20 Indonesia advocates companies to accelerate green transition towards net zero emission target and equip stakeholders with the necessary knowledge to benefit from carbon market. To embody the spirit of gotong royong and capture the huge upside of inclusive growth, the B20 Indonesia pushes for next-generation mid-sized companies to be part of the global supply chain and builds necessary infrastructure to promote the impactful inclusion of women in the global economy. Finally, to prepare for future health crises, the B20 Indonesia urges the need for equitable healthcare to bolster health system resilience. This journey has shown how collaboration and spirit to innovate can drive change. Through commitments and programs that we have built together, let's continue to realize an innovative, inclusive, and collaborative growth for all.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, our next agenda will be the speech by the G20 leader with the main theme of building a strong and resilient economic recovery strategy of all. Please welcome the Prime Minister of Australia, His Excellency Mr. Anthony Albanese.
Good evening, everyone. Selamat sore. I'm absolutely delighted to be here with you in Bali, and I particularly want to acknowledge my friend, President Widodo. It is great to be back in Indonesia and to congratulate President Widodo and his team for hosting what will be a very successful G20 meeting following what has been a successful hosting of the B20 here today. I do want to thank the Indonesian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Kadin, including its chairperson and host of the B20, Pak Asad, and chair of the B20, Ibu Shinta, for bringing us together, and I thank you for your addresses here this evening. President Widodo has once again shown us enormously kind hospitality. This is my 7th official visit to Indonesia and my 2nd as Prime Minister. And the new government that I lead is determined to write a new chapter in Australia and Indonesia's long history of friendship and cooperation. I was reminded of that long history during my first visit here as Prime Minister, when I visited not just Jakarta, but also Makassar. Centuries ago, the sea route between Makassar and the top end of Australia was a flourishing trade corridor. Each December, the Yolngu people of Arnhem Land would look to the sea, waiting for the horizon to fill with the sails of Macassan vessels. The Yolngu immortalised those boats in their art, and you can find them painted on sandstone and bark, their sails forever full with the wind that brought them across the sea. The relationship between the Macassan seafarers and First Nations people of Australia was built around trade, but it was also built around mutual respect. It was a relationship of equals that set the template for the people-to-people contact that has always been at the very heart of Australia's relationship with the people of Indonesia. So much has changed since that era, but what has remained, and indeed thrived, is our mutual respect. Knowing this history gives us perspective, and it also reminds us that relationships between nations are always bigger and broader and deeper and richer than just leader-to-leader conversations, as vital as they are. That's why when I came to Indonesia in June, I was joined by a large delegation of government ministers and senior business leaders, the head of the Business Council of Australia, who's with us again this evening, the CEO of the Commonwealth Bank, and representatives of major companies such as Wesfarmers, Fortescue, BlueScope, Sun Cable and Thales. And I'm delighted that so many Australian business leaders are joining me here again today. Australian businesses are energised by the tremendous opportunities that this nation and this region hold. This B20 gathering, bringing together influential business leaders from around the world, draws on that same spirit, recognising that innovative, inclusive and collaborative growth won't be built and sustained by the actions of government alone. It will depend on the insights and enterprise and cooperation and investment of businesses and financial institutions and civil society and workers' representatives as well. So I welcome the B20's insights on the way forward, and I thank you for the care and effort that you have put into crafting your recommendations. And I embrace the goal that you have set: innovative growth, because the challenges we face are different to previous economic downturns and the policy response must be different too. Inclusive growth, because the quality of our response and the measure of our recovery must hold no one back and leave no one behind. And collaborative growth, because in a globalised economy, it is not just markets and products and technologies that we hold in common, it is challenges but also opportunities as well. Right now we face a collective economic challenge new to the G20, indeed new to our generation. It was the global financial crisis and the seismic upheaval in the banking system which first elevated the G20 to a leader-level meeting. Leaders gathered in Washington in 2008 to unfreeze global credit markets and shore up the capital positions of financial institutions. And they came to London in 2009 to craft a global economic stimulus package. As Infrastructure Minister, I had the privilege of being part of the Australian delegation at that meeting. The financial crisis we faced then produced a global demand shock. The economic challenge that we face now is primarily a global supply shock. The long tail of the pandemic is constricting supply chains and stretching workforces. And Russia's invasion of Ukraine is inflicting severe, ongoing disruption to food, fuel and energy markets. Inflation is biting advanced economies around the world, and central banks are responding with the sharpest and most synchronised tightening of monetary policy that we have seen in decades. For governments to see off the threat of inflation, to prevent runaway inflation from eroding national prosperity and devaluing people's wages, we must ensure fiscal policy is working in concert with monetary policy, not contradicting it. And macroeconomic policy coordination, along with cross-border collaboration between businesses such as those in this room, has an important part to play in that. I will always remember the sense of purpose and urgency with which world leaders in London worked to coordinate that $1 trillion global stimulus package, while at the same time laying down a shared commitment to free market principles, to the rule of law, to open trade and investment, to competitive markets and to effectively regulated financial systems, knowing that these are essential to building stronger and more inclusive prosperity for all. Even then, in the heart of the storm, there was still a focus on the horizon. Put simply, the G20 was made for moments like these and built for these challenges, founded on the unifying principle of multilateralism, that we can achieve far more together than we ever will alone. So yes, we can recover together and we can recover stronger. Indeed, recovering stronger depends on recovering together. We do this by ensuring that our tax systems reward people for their hard work and repay the initiative and enterprise of our businesses and job creators, by building the resilience and diversity of supply chains so we are better prepared for global shocks, and by helping developing countries to manage rising debt sustainably, risk by implementing measures such as the G20 Common Framework for Debt Treatment, and achieving the innovative and inclusive and collaborative growth that the B20 have challenged us to seek also means investing in the skills and productivity of our workforce and increasing participation opportunities, as well as unlocking the potential of people who have historically been locked out of career opportunities because of gender, race, disadvantage or disability. And of course, collaboration means strengthening our trade links, not just in the exchange of raw materials or finished products, but in the sharing of research and technology and education and expertise. Governments can help by breaking down tariff walls and building trade bridges. We can upgrade infrastructure, our ports and freight terminals, our energy pipelines and transmission technology to speed the exchange of goods and resources. But business also has a great deal to teach us about effective and informed cross-border collaboration and the value of competition and best practice productivity. And whether it's technology, skills, research, jobs, investment, infrastructure or trade, the challenge and the opportunity that can draw all of these threads together is responding to climate change. For governments and business, investing and developing clean energy will enhance our individual energy security and it will strengthen our collective action on climate change. I am very proud that my government has acted quickly to drive the transformation to net zero, and I'm pleased that so many members of the Australian business community shared and support this commitment. We know Australia can be a renewable energy superpower, and we're working to grow our clean energy export industry, but we want to do it in cooperation with Indonesia and other nations to help reduce their emissions, to grow their economies and improve their living standards. Because just as none of us are immune from the global challenge of climate change, all of us have a part to play in the solution. And I know that President Widodo is very passionate about this. And I want to commend Indonesia's leadership in developing the G20 Bali Energy Transitions Roadmap. It sends such a powerful message to global markets, giving investors the confidence to scale up their ambitions, knowing that G20 members are committed to accelerating the transition to clean energy. That's what uncertain times demand, not just the determination to weather the storm, but the ambition and the vision to sail beyond it. On that note, I'm delighted that our next G20 host, India, led by Prime Minister Modi, will be guided by its aspiration to ensure economic progress and the environment go hand in hand. And I am confident that India's 2023 G20 presidency will build successfully on the achievements of the Bali Summit. Bapak President, all of us here are eager to hear your reflections on India's host year and your ambitions for the future. Terima kasih.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now proceed to our next ceremony, which is the B20 presidency handover to India. And to hand over the presidency, I would like to invite to come up on stage Ms. Sinta Kamdani, the chair of B20 Indonesia. And to receive this presidency handover, please come up on stage as well, Mr. Chandrajit Banerjee, representing the Confederation of Indian Industry as the next host of B20. Ms. Sinta Kamdani, please pass the B20 Indonesia communique to Mr. Chandrajit Banerjee. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now proceed to our ceremony, which is the symbolic submission of the B20 Indonesia Presidency Report to the President, the B20 Communique. To pass over this document, I would like to invite to come up on stage Mr. Arshad Rashid, Chairman of the Indonesian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, or Kadin Indonesia, host of B20 Indonesia. And to receive it, I would like to invite the President of the Republic of Indonesia, His Excellency Mr. Joko Widodo. The B20 Indonesia Presidency Report is the outcome of the B20 Indonesia Presidency, emphasizing the final B20 policy recommendations and legacy outcomes. Thank you very much, Bapak Presiden. Please stay on stage, as we'd like to listen to your keynote speech. And thank you, Mr. Rashid, Ms. Sinta.
Selamat sore. Yang saya hormati Perdana Menteri Australia Yang Mulia Anthony Albanese, yang saya hormati Ketua DPR Republik Indonesia, Bapak Ibu hadirin undangan yang berbahagia. Bulan Januari yang lalu, saya berbicara di depan B20 pada awal masa tugasnya. Masih pandemi berat saat itu.
In the pandemic.
Saya menyampaikan bahwa
And
di
at the time, I said
kesulitan,
that for every problem, for every challenge,
ada peluang.
there is always a silver
Jangan
line,
pesimis.
an opportunity. So don't be pessimistic. I said that.
Kemudian 10
And then,
bulan berselang.
10 months after that,
Pandemi masih ada,
and the pandemic was still ongoing.
ada perang,
And we had a war,
ada krisis pangan,
We have food crisis.
ada krisis energi,
And there is also this energy crisis, financial crisis.
tapi kita patut bersyukur
But we should be grateful
kuartal kedua
that Indonesia in the second
5,44%.
quarter, we still grew at 5.4%.
Dan di kuartal ketiga
And in the third
kita tumbuh
quarter,
lebih kuat lagi di
we became stronger at 5.72%.
inflasi
And
bisa
inflation
kita kelola di angka
can be managed as well.
di September
And it remained in September at, and this is due to also fuel price rise,
jadi 5,9%.
it became 5.9%. However, in October, our inflation went down to 5.7%.
Managing Director dari
So managing director from IMF said,
menyampaikan
so the name is Kristalina, she said that Indonesia
menjadi salah satu
is one of
terang di tengah
the bright lights
ekonomi dunia.
in the darkness of the world.
Oleh sebab itu perlu
Therefore,
strategi besar
we need to make a major strategy, and I have been saying this consistently, and we have to be consistent to do this. The first one is we have to do value-added investment. We have to
memang harus kita stop
deal with our raw materials. We have to make value-added. We want to do this for our domestic growth, and it is something to do with our revenue for the state, and it's also to
penciptaan lapangan kerja
increase the jobs in Indonesia.
dan sudah kita mulai
And we have already started that
dalam rangka
with
membangun
nickel,
sebuah
and we tried to build a giant ecosystem for EV battery.
baterai listrik.
So that is EV battery for EV for electrical vehicles. So I'm just offering
Anthony
to Prime Minister Anthony Albanese.
Australia ada lithium.
In Australia, you have lithium. We have nickel
Kalau
here.
digabung itu sudah
If we combine our power together, then it will become the battery for electrical vehicles.
tapi saya minta
But
Perdana Menteri
I ask
Albanese
Prime Minister Albanese,
yang bisa dibawa ke Indonesia
so
saja.
please bring the lithium to only to Indonesia, sir.
Kita bersama-sama
So together,
hilirisasi di Indonesia.
let's do this added value investment in Indonesia.
Yang kedua yang berkaitan
And the
dengan
second one,
ekonomi hijau.
this is related to green economy.
Saya sampaikan bahwa
I've said that many times that the potential
energi baru terbarukan,
for the new and renewable energy
renewable energy di
in Indonesia,
besar.
it is abundant. 430,000 megawatt is our potential coming from hydropower, from geothermal, from solar panel, and from wind power. Everything is there. So this is actually the
para investor
opportunity for investors
jalin kerjasama
to collaborate with Indonesia
membawa investasi,
and to bring investment here, bring your technology here, because we need money that is not little. So together we have to build the green economy in Indonesia, and we have already prepared in North Kalimantan 30,000 hectares of land
untuk
for
industrial park.
green industrial park,
Saya yakin akan
and I am very sure
investor
all investors will come and they will be excited to also develop green products from Indonesia.
kawasan itu ada sungai
And we know that we have Kayan River there, that can produce green energy up to 13,000 megawatt, and that is in the form of hydropower. And the last point, and this is related to digitalization. Well, please, the big countries, think about the small one. The big one have to take care of the small ones. The big ones, you have to think about the micro businesses. Big businesses have to make sure that no one will be left behind. So we've tried in the last 3 years to upgrade these small micro companies to enter digital platforms. And up to now, 19 million of these MSEM, they have already entered the digital platforms. From the 64 million SMEs that we have here. And our target for 2024, we hope that this will reach above 30 million. So this means these small micro companies, don't leave them behind. This is my message. For India, so please continue to do this for the micro and small medium enterprises. Please continue this effort. And last but not least, congratulations to India presidency of G20 next year, and I am very convinced that this will be developed further. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Bapak Ibu yang terhormat, today we had a thoughtful discussions and intriguing insights from all of our respectable speakers. On behalf of the committee, we would like to thank all of our guests and speakers for attending this event. And now we would like to invite the President of the Republic of Indonesia and the Prime Minister of Australia to leave the venue. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise. Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to thank our sponsors as well, PT Astra International Tbk, PT Bayan Resources Tbk, PT Indica Energy Tbk, Sinarmas, Apple Group, Bakri Group, PT Bank Sentral Asia Tbk, PT Bank Negara Indonesia Persero Tbk, PT Elang Mahkota Teknologi Tbk, PT GoTo Gojek Tokopedia Tbk, PT HM Sampurna Tbk, Indonesia Financial Group, PT Indofood Sukses Makmur Tbk, Lipo Group, Permata Bank, PT Pertamina Persero, PT Sawit Sumbermas Sarana Tbk, PT Telekomunikasi Indonesia Persero Tbk, PT Virtue Dragon Nickel Industrial Park, Adaro Indonesia, Jarum Foundation, PT Grab Teknologi Indonesia. Ladies and gentlemen, we would also like to inform you that the B20 Summit Indonesia 2022 closing dinner will start today at around 6:30 p.m. at Taman Bagawan. And you will be finding some talents from Indonesia. Indonesian National Orchestra by Frankie Raden, Dewa Bujana, Elva Singers, Ruth Sahanaya, Audiensi, Krakatau, Earth, Wind and Fire Experience Feat, Al McKay, and All Stars. And please do bring your B20 Summit ID for entrance. And for those of you who will attend the closing dinner at Taman Bagawan, please proceed to the East Lobby. Please proceed to the East Lobby as we will provide shuttle services to Taman Bagawan. For those of you who will attend the closing dinner at Taman Bagawan, please proceed to the East Lobby as we will provide shuttle services to Taman Bagawan. My name is Rory Ashari and I thank you for attending the B20 Summit Indonesia 2022, Advancing Innovative, Inclusive and Collaborative Growth. Good day and we will see you next year. Thank you.